Alright everyone, it's Dokkan time again, and today I'm going to be doing a full-on how to build for every single one of these Heroes units. Yes, every single Dragon Ball Heroes unit I will be doing a build for. Now there is a couple things to be noting here before we get into it though. Number one, not all of these will have roll tips. I apologize. I know a lot of people do like my roll tips, but unfortunately a large portion, if not the majority, of these units require to either be on a Super Dragon Ball Heroes team or they're on such a constricted team that it kind of makes them not really worth making a roll tips for. I have the roll tips primarily to be there to suggest different teams that people might not be sure of how to use a specific unit, and you know, suggestion of like what their role in the fight is. But for a large majority of these older-esque units, you're probably going to be either doing like full dodge, their slot 2 or 3 floating unit. Not many of these guys on here can even be thinking about slot 1, and I would argue to say maybe like 5 can go into slot 1. So yeah, not a lot of them are going to be getting any. There is a few that will have roll tips, very few, and it was mostly out of just like that at the top of my head at the time. But yeah. Number 2, you can just give these units dodge if you so choose. Aside for the most recently released units, I would say a lot of these older units are just straight up dodge or die units, but I will be making builds for them as what they're good at and how to take advantage of their kits. Not just to take into the hardest content and hope you can pray to RNGs enough to get through the fight. If you were just going to do full dodge on a unit, I don't even know why you clicked on the video, and I'll give an honesty. So with that in mind, one more thing, I will not be doing defense calculations in this video. Yes, if you want to see defense calculations for any of these units, please go take a look at Halvard over on Twitter, or go take a look at one of my videos for said such units, and I will be going over the defense in their own individual videos. But for this large, giant video of units, I will not be going over defense calculations, as a majority of them don't even hit 700k, 800, a million, and some of them are like trying really hard to even push past that point. As such, they do feel very irrelevant on their defense numbers, as if you look at the meta right now, you got bosses that will super one time and their normals are doing 1 million or 700 right on the dot plus. So a lot of these units straight up can barely, if not at all, tank even normals at this current point. So I don't see much of a point in going with defense calculations. You should kind of a little bit know better just based on looking at their kit that they wouldn't be usable in certain ends of the content. And I'll kind of give you an idea of which ones will be okay-ish and not okay-ish. I do have these units categorized into specific areas. So, otherwise, this video is only meant to answer the question of how do I build all of these older hero units primarily. But I'm going to be telling you how to build every single one of them that exist. Remember that Dragon Ball Heroes is over. This last lineup of Heroes units was it. We will no longer be getting new units in Dragon Ball Heroes, so what you see here, all of these units, this is it. It's game over, man. We will not ever get another boost to the Dragon Ball Heroes category because the IP itself is done. It's gone. It's over. So, with all that being said, and one last thing, these are all just my suggestions. So, if you can build them however you so wish, if you don't agree with how I have chosen to build some of these units, that's completely fine. It is entirely up to you. It is a single-player game. And honestly, some of these units, it ain't gonna matter how you build them. So, with all of that finally being said, done, and over with, let's start off with the free-to-play units going forward. And we're going to start off with Ahms. So, Ahms is an interesting character in the Super Dragon Ball Heroes universe, is that he's like a blob. He's a bio-android that actually absorbs Hit, Rose, Frieza, Cell, and then he gets absorbed into Sea-Lass. He's a very interesting, overpowered character in a way. but ironically enough, he's pretty bad. He's pretty much only going to be on heroes teams. Outside of that, he is on Gohan's Kamehameha team because he does have Kamehameha. He only raises defense and lowers attack and defense, and he does support extreme class allies and artificial life forms. So there is that to keep in mind. But otherwise, his defense is mediocre. There's not enough additionals in the world to save him. So just go with that. Unfortunately, he also has a very terrible set of links outside of literally 2 or 3, and that being big bad bosses primarily. So he is a big bad boss unit. If you want to just throw him onto a floating position of a team, at least he'll have big bad bosses and he'll have a little bit of support going in. But otherwise, he doesn't really link well with any characters or units that you'd be realistically using. So that is probably something to just keep in mind, that he is straight up a full dodge and then additional unit. And that's it. Please do not waste your good orbs on this. I merely put these here as obvious, suggestion of how to build him. You do not waste these orbs if you got them. Moving on to the next unit, which is going to be Cumber. Yes, Cumber is his name. He's named after a cucumber. So, Cumber is only on a couple 200%. Unfortunately, all of them being heroes and then time traveler lead. So, not much options there. He does stack attack and defense, though, so I will tell you that. Stacking attack and defense is pretty useful. He also lowers defense, but, I mean, his defense is so low at the beginning that he would have to additional, like, 3 or 4 times even to be getting to a moderately decent defense number. I'm talking, like, less than 500k right off the bat. Of course, on moderate new teams with domains, extra support along the way, you could probably get his defense up a little bit, but not enough to really make a huge difference. You're never going to put him in slot 1. That's the other thing. This guy wants to be in the first slot. He wants to be in slot 1 as the first attacker, and he'll get a free additional super if he gets hit as the first attacker in a turn. Otherwise, he does lower superclass enemies' attack and defense by 30% after receiving a hit. His summonable version has a similar ability, by the way. Otherwise, he's not really on any categories. He's not really linking well with anybody. Maybe you can grab his SSR for a unique player card art. Maybe that could work, potentially, maybe. Anyways, I would say full additional if you really want to use him, fully build up his defense. Otherwise, he's literally, I'm not even kidding, literally dodge or die unit right here. So this would be the only suggestion you could go with. Obviously, if you want to give him dodge, give him dodge. And these are only suggestions right here of either or, not, yeah. So, let's go ahead and move on to the next unit, which is going to be Great Saiyaman 4. Yes, Great Saiyaman 4. So, Great Saiyaman 4 is actually not a bad free-to-play unit. He's actually pretty good. I would say he's very usable, in fact. Not like super, like, red zone, blue zone, or anything like that, but, he's actually pretty usable. So Great Saiyaman 4 is actually an awakening of the Beat unit. That is his name. His name is Beat from the Super Dragon Ball Heroes team. He's a youth category lead at 77% and super class by 40%. Not terrible. He's actually a good starting unit. He stacks attack and defense and lowers defense. And then attack and defense 120, and then he's got super class allies boofed by 30% on defense, and then youth categories specifically attack plus 30%. And he does have built-in crit, and he does have a 50% chance to launch another super attack. So, I mean, honestly, he's not too terrible as far as a free-to-play unit goes. It could be worse. As far as his linking partners, his perfect linking partners, straight up, the Great Saiyaman 3. Great Saiyaman 3 and 4, such a satisfying turn rotation. I don't know what it is. When you get units like this, it doesn't matter if they're free to play or whatever have you. It's just a satisfying rotation, just to have like good synergy units like this put together on a team. But anyways, he's just a good kind of solid free to play team unit for free to play content specifically. Give him full additional so he can keep stacking as much as possible and then put the rest into dodge, of course. Or if you so wish, flip it and just give him full dodge. Entirely up to you. Once again, if you're a full dodge advocate, I'm not entirely 100% sure why you're watching these videos if you're just going to give everyone dodge. Okay, next one on the list is going to be Lags. So, Lags isn't terrible. She's got a little bit of utility. Little bit of stats. She's a peppy gal, so she's on Roshi's and Android 21 team. Of course, other Heroes teams. She does give Dragon Ball Heroes 77% lead, so there's that. And she lowers attack and defense, and she seals. She also has up to a 50% chance to dodge, so as long as you have 2 other Dragon Ball Heroes category allies on the team. And then she actually does have like built-in additional. You can have a 70% chance to additional super if the enemy's 50% or less on HP. And she does have built-in critical hit chance. But the enemy does have to be at attack down, defense down status, or sealed, basically. So, basically the way that this ability works right here, to get to the 50% crit, you have to hit the enemy when they're at attack down, defense down status. So, if she double supers, it'll count as twice. So, if super once, get 10% crit chance. Super twice, get 20%. But it has to be against an enemy that is in attack down, defense down status, or sealed or stunned. So, not the worst thing ever. She has Cold Judgment and Battlefield Diva. The loyalty link is pretty terrible, though. But obviously, overall, she's just going to be linking with Peppy Gals and other Super Dragon Ball Heroes units primarily. She's not going to have like a perfect link partner, though. But anyways, yeah, I think she's okay. She's just a full dodge kind of, not necessarily a support unit, but she is a full dodge unit that you just take advantage for, primarily for her utility, specifically is what you use her for. So, moving on to the next free-to-play unit, which will be, and I was dead serious when I said we're going through every single Dragon Ball Heroes unit. I was dead serious. I'm even talking about this guy that nobody has. If you got this Gotenks, he was free because they dropped him in your box. He was a free unit. Literally, they gave him away. It's not possible to get him anymore. So this is gloating material right here. I don't even have this Gotenks because I missed the first Heroes event at the time. So, I mean, it's pretty bad. It is not possible to get this guy anymore. He is on 200% for Kamehameha and Super Dragon Ball Hero teams. But there is nothing to him. He's never been touched after he was given out. Unfortunately, I think he could have been interesting if they had decided to move forward with that, but otherwise he just links with other fusion-based characters and so forth. But yeah, so moving on to the next unit. I don't even have to tell you what to do. It's just full dodge. If you have him, I'll be astonished. I'd be astonished if you actually had him. Moving on to the next unit, which is Putine. Demon Goddess Putine, whichever way you want to do it. I always call her Putine. She has a couple 200% options here. Peppy Gals, of course, with Roshi or 21. Heroes, leaders. And then, of course, Lord Slug with the demonic power, because she is a demon. So, she does raise attack and defense, and she has a 50% chance to stun. She does support crossover category allies by key +2 attack and defense +30%. So she is a supportive unit, and she can also lower the enemy's attack and defense by 20% and seal the enemy just for attacking them. She doesn't even have to super. On the very off and unrealistic chance, if you killed an enemy, then it would move on to the next one and seal. But anyways, but yeah. Otherwise, she's not really doing too much. She does have a 30% chance to crit, as long as the enemy is stunned or sealed. But yeah. Demonic Power, Battlefield Diva, Shocking Speed, Master of Magic, Cold Judgment. Not the worst links ever, but she's basically only going to be linking with, like, Towa and a couple other Heroes-esque units, of course. And that's primarily going to be her best linking partners, along with some Peppy Gals. So, moving on to the next unit, which is going to be Salsa. Yes, his name is Salsa. Demon God Salsa. I'm just sad we didn't get his, the manga's, like, friend version, the friend of him. I think it was, like, Onion or something like that. I can't remember what the, what his friend was, but there was a fusion that you could have done, that they did in the manga with another character, and I'm just sad we didn't get that other character. But anyways, 200%, of course, Heroes, Time Travelers, Lord Slug, because he's a demon. He greatly raises attack and defense, and he seals, so he does have a little utility. He has up to, like, a 70% chance to dodge. It just depends on how many enemies you're fighting. As long as you have a full crossover team and you're fighting one enemy, there'll be a 50% chance to dodge. If you're fighting 4 enemies, you can get up to a 70% chance to dodge, but it's very unlikely you'll be in a lot of situations where you'll be fighting more than 3 enemies, or more than 1, really. So there is that to keep in mind. He does get an additional attack and defense every time he does evade, so that is good. It's something, you know. But otherwise, Thirst for Conquest and Terrifying Conqueror, so he is on a couple other categories. But he primarily links well with other demonic power units and then a couple other randoms like the Golden Frieza and such. But yeah, not the worst free-to-play unit, but definitely not the best. Full dodge unit, of course, as you could tell by his kit. You just want to go full dodge and put the rest into additional. He is a tech unit, unfortunately, so he, you know, you don't get that extra level 5. Yeah, full dodge. And moving on to the next unit, which will honestly is probably the best free-to-play unit in this build video. We only got one more free-to-play unit after this, but she is straight up a full dodge unit. Put the rest into additional. Arguably, you could give her full additional. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not gonna go bring up the details, but if she double supers, she can get up to 2 million defense. Yeah. You go check out my how to build for her, my actual single video of how to build for her, and you'll see those defense calculations. So once again, her leaders are basically just gonna be Peppy Gal's teams, Heroes teams, and Lord Slug for 200%. Since she greatly raises attack and defense, and then she has a 50% chance to dodge in slot 2 or 3, so she's a good dodging unit in slot 2 and 3. And she can get up to 65% chance to dodge with each attack dodged. She also does support a little bit, attack and defense plus 30%, but you do have to be on a team with 3 or more extreme class allies on the team. So basically, you know, Lord Slug, full extreme team is probably her best runnable team, if not maybe like Fusion Zamasu or something like that. And she can give an extra additional attack and defense 15% for 2 turns. She has like a whole crazy part of her passive where she like she gives extra evasion, gives extra support, off rotation, by the way, support. And then she like orb changes, but it's literally only one time, which is really unfortunate. But being an orb changer, you know, getting these random buffs in here, 2 million defense, she is probably easily the best free-to-play unit. She's not really going to be linking well with anybody other than herself, of course, and some Peppy Gals, and a very select few of Dragon Ball Heroes units. So, and then we have one more free-to-play unit on this part of the video, which is going to be for the female warrior in black. In other words, Yamcha's bride. Yamcha's only actual love interest in the entire series of Dragon Ball, other than Bulma. She is going to be on all Heroes teams or Peppy Gal's leaders such as Roshi and 21. I would suggest her to be run on Roshi's team, by the way. She does raise attack and defense for 3 turns. And then she does have a great chance of forming a crit. She's got all these crazy abilities in her, in all honesty. This is a huge paragraph of stuff, and I'm not going to waste your time with it. But basically, she can additional, but she's primarily there to support Yamcha. And that's not a joke, because she gives Yamcha attack and defense of 86% to herself and Yamcha. That is the craziest, weirdest ability, and she orb changes, by the way. But the only team you can actually utilize that part of her passive on is on Roshi's team and with Intelligence Yamcha or the STR free-to-play Yamcha that just came out. So she's a very weird, funky unit that needs to be run on a very specific team. You'll basically never be linking her with a perfect link partner because the only thing this girl is here for is to, and I quote from the anime and manga, to support her darling, Yamcha. So this is the one free-to-play unit I will give you a roll tips for, as she is primarily a whole just support unit they're using for the Intelligence Yamcha, in my opinion. And I've gotten Yamcha to hit pretty hard. I'm not gonna lie, Yamcha feels like a brand new unit with all that support. But otherwise, throw on Roshi team, have Bulma off rotation, and you know, Yamcha, and throw her into slot 2 or 3, just float her off. She's a very interesting unit, very interesting free-to-play and support unit. But anyways, that was all the free-to-play units. So let's go ahead and move on to what I consider the lowest end of the heroes units, to the point of where I would say some of these free-to-play units are better. But anyways, let me get this pulled up. Alright, so this next set of units is basically going to be units that I feel can be used a little bit more, that are not necessarily like crazy. They're okay. They're not amazing. They're probably the lowest end of the stick as far as heroes units go, not counting the free-to-play units. Generally, some of these units, like this Towa, do have a couple uses. You can use them in certain areas. You can use them for certain parts of their kits. But some of them are just straight up not worth using whatsoever. In the case of the AGL Towa, I do have a slight soft spot because she does have a couple things in her kit that actually do make her usable. But at the end of the day, she will be 100% a full dodge and then put the rest into additional unit. And there is no if and or buts about that. I might not be I'm not a dodge advocate, but I will tell you, I know when to give a unit dodge. And this is a unit to give dodge. She is a Peppy Gal unit though, and she is a demon. Ironically though, oddly enough, she is not actually on Lord Slug's 200%. But she is on Roshi and Android 21's 200%, so those are outside options of heroes 200%. She only greatly lowers attack and defense. Now, I say only, but greatly lowering attack and defense is still very good. She does also buff extreme class allies by attack and defense of 40%, and then she gives an extra buff to extreme class allies by 60%, and fully recovers your HP bar when you hit below HP of 30% or less. I will tell you, 100% attack and defense increase and a full Sensu Bean recover, that comes in handy in specific events that you could take her into. Should you be taking this into every fight? No, not whatsoever, because more than likely, she's the reason you went down to below HP of 30% or less. So that is something to just keep in mind as far as that. She does have those unique abilities, though, and I do feel that it does help. I do feel like it does help in certain areas of the game. Otherwise, she just has your kind of basic-esque links right here for a lot of these heroes. Demon units with Master of Magic and Demonic Power and Thirst for Conquest. She does have Scientist and Battlefield Diva, though, and I do feel like those are like growing links that actually are getting better and better every day. Of course, she will fully link up with other Towas, of course, and the other Peppy Gals of the Dragon Ball Heroes verse, and then other Peppy Gals units, of course. But at the end of the day, she's a full dodge unit. But let's go ahead and move on to the next unit, which, as you can see, is going to be Baby Janemba. Yes, quite the character. You would think with Baby controlling Janemba, you would think this would be like some overpowered, crazy character. You know, and for a time, perhaps, you know, back in 2021, the unit wasn't too bad. But overall, when your only team option is freaking LR Final Form Cooler and Heroes, and you basically have nothing in your kit, you know, it's pretty bad. He only raises attack, and then he massively lowers enemies' defense. I will say this is probably the best part of him, is he massively lowers defense. You could technically take advantage of this against an STR boss, but I will say that this guy is full dodge all the way. 100% full dodge. If they had actually made this Baby Janemba an int unit, I think he would have been immensely better and still kind of useful. But unfortunately, his dodge chance is still too low, even if you get it up to like 27 dodge. He does have a 50% chance of dodging right here. Then he gets another additional 12% within the same turn of each attack evaded. So this does go, you know, it stacks on top of each other. So if he dodges, you know, 4 or 5 attacks, then yeah, you have a 100% chance of dodge. But the odds are is that you only have a 50% chance mixed on whatever's in your hidden potential. If you even miss one dodge, you're gonna... If you didn't notice, this is all he has for defense. This is it right here. Yeah, he's got 120% defense, and that's it. And then he'll get another 120 when performing a super attack if your HP is 60% or more. That's not a lot of defense whatsoever, especially with none in from his super. So he is straight up dodge or die. You will die on touch. You will die. but he does have a pretty crazy amount of defense. And I will say, if you're a dodge advocate, go crazy, man. But this guy never dodges for me, even if I have 27 dodge on him. Thirst for Conquest, Metamorphosis, and Shocking Speed are probably the best links on him, other than Shattering the Limit. He is on our official life forms, Terrifying Conquerors, and Corroded Body and Mind. His best link partners are, of course, going to be the weirdest freaking ones ever, being with Baby, because, you know, he is Baby. He's Baby Janemba. And then a couple other units, like the other Corrupted Janemba and so forth. But unfortunately, he's not really fitting in on the team, you know? Like, who brought Bro on the team? Bro thinks he's part of the team, basically. Full dodge unit, though. I have used him in a couple situations where I needed a full dodge unit, and the very small amount of times he did help. And some people, you might be able to bet your life on RNGesus. But moving on to the next unit. Some people are going to be mad about this one, and this one does have a 55%. But Super Saiyan 4 Bardock, and I'm sorry, King Hitman, but once again, I don't know what's up with Akatsuki. I don't know what's with Dokkan, but they just don't like Bardock. I don't know what's their beef with this man, but every Bardock just kind of sucks. It's very unfortunate. Bardock just needs to go full additional, primarily. That's why the 55% build right here is level 7 additional, because he has no point to having crit. So goes the endless bullcrap there is of STR and TEQ units not needing crit when they already have it built in a little. As far as his kit goes, like I said, full additional, or you can go full dodge. It's either or. You can swap it back and forth. I don't care. Either way, he is a full dodge unit. He's only going to be on heroes teams and a couple other things. Oddly enough, he's a storied figure, so he is on Fat Buu's team, which is interesting, but he doesn't really fit in per se. He is on Saiyans Have No Limits, and of course he's on TEQ Bardock's team. So he does have a couple options outside of heroes, which is always nice, but he is restricted. He does raise attack and defense, and he does seal, so he has a very minuscule amount of utility. The sealing is nice, but he doesn't have an additional attack and defense of 100% unless you have 2 or more crossover category allies on the team, which is pretty much mandatory. And then he has attacks effective against all types when your HP is 70% or more. He performs a crit when HP is 90% or more, and then he has a 30% chance to dodge. And there's another Giant Ape category ally attacking in the same turn. So no matter what, you need a Super Saiyan 4 unit with him, or Giant Ape power category ally in the same turn. Which, you know, with Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta, that was fine. You know, I didn't even think about it really. You know, he was the best slot 1 defense. But overall, Bardock's defense is just not good enough. I think if you get a double super, you can get him up to like close to 1 million. But even then, he's very RNG. He's very RNG. You have to get an additional to even be a moderately good defense margin to even take normals. And you're not getting all of these links activated. Unfortunately, this Bardock is plagued with the ever-growing The First Awakened link, which is just an absolutely terrible link to be giving to solely Bardock's specific Gokus. That it's not very, you know, it doesn't have a pattern to say of which one of these is for that. And I mean, they gave The First Awakened to LR free-to-play Piccolo, for crying out loud. So I mean, it is what it is. A very odd link that you'll never be really sharing with anybody. So he is missing out on that link at all points of time. But his best link partners are, of course, going to be Gohan and other Super Saiyan 4s and other Gokus and other Bardocks. Oddly enough, he actually came out at the same time with this Gohan, and they were like a perfect rotation kind of thing for a while, until Gohan fell off and didn't have enough defense, even though he has a very good, decent kit that made him defensively good. Unfortunately, the meta curve hit and made that Gohan kind of pointless to use. But anyways, so that's Bardock, unfortunately. Full additional or full dodge, entirely up to you. So, moving on to the next one, we got Dabura here. Dabura is an interesting character. I like this Dabura. If you didn't notice, I'm in like a demonic power, you know, kind of power shift right now. Lord Slug's demonic power has given me hope to having some interesting extreme units really get buffed, introduced into the game. And honestly, on Lord Slug's team, this Dabura can actually look decent. He has 200% on Lord Slug and 200% on other heroes teams, but that is it. He is a 150 Dragon Ball Heroes leader. He greatly raises defense, so he does have that going for him. And he has a 50% chance to stun, so he does have utility. His passive is actually pretty decently leveled. 150 attack and defense, 150 attack and defense, and attacked enemies attack and defense minus 35% for 2 turns. And he launches a 50% chance to additional super when you're only facing one enemy. He gets another attack plus 150 when enemy is in attack down defense down status. He gets another attack plus 50% and reduces damage received by 10% per existing enemy. So if you go into a fight with multiple enemies, he can have 50% damage reduction. He gets more damage and more defense when there's 2 or more enemies, and he has a 30% chance to, or a 50% chance to dodge, excuse me. So, I mean, he's actually got a pretty decent kit when you're fighting multiple enemies. And I would have to say that he's probably one of the better units in this specific group of units that I'm putting up right now. I struggled to not put him onto, like, the good tier list of heroes units because the only thing that's holding this Dabura back is fighting multiple enemies. When he's fighting multiple enemies, he's a completely different unit. He's crazy. I mean, with Domain, I got this guy up to like 10 million plus damage. And I'm you know, that doesn't sound impressive. You know, 10 million's not impressive this day and age. But, you know, a unit that EZA'd last year, and that's a heroes unit at 10 million, additionally, 50% damage reduction, 50% dodge. You know, he's good. He's pretty decent. His defense still isn't crazy, but it is high enough to be tanking normals. So long as you're on, like, Lord Slug 200% and you got support and so forth. As long as you're supporting him correctly, he can actually be pretty decent. But either way, I'm realistic about how you should build him, and it is still full dodge or full additional. Thankfully, he is an AGL unit, so he does get an extra level 5 additional in his hidden potential system. Personally, I went more towards the additional route because dodge doesn't work for me. If you've watched any of my streams, you know that every time I go into a fight, dodge just hates me. It just absolutely hates me. But either way, full dodge or full additional or mixture of the two, flip-flop, whichever you so choose, there's just no point in giving him crit, though. You're using him primarily for utility basis. That is the main reason you will really use Dabura. Though I will say, with the fact that he has a couple built-in additionals and then he can get a respectable damage number, I wouldn't say it's the worst thing you could do to give him even a little bit of crit if you really wanted to only take him into what he's good at, which is fights that have multiple enemies. I don't think crit would be the worst idea, but I am 100% not coping and know that 99.9% of people are just going to give him full dodge or give him a mixture of additional and dodge. They're not going to really bother with the rest, and they'll use him for utility basis. But there's nothing wrong with that. He doesn't exactly have a perfect link partner by any means. It's other Majins, Dabura, Janemba, and other heroes units is primarily his best link partners. And that's because of links like Master of Magic and Shattering the Limit and Shocking Speed, of course. But I don't think he's a bad unit. I really don't. I don't think that this Dabura is a bad unit. I actually like him quite a bit. So, moving on to the next unit, which is going to be just full dodge. Just full dodge. Unfortunately, this cooler is pretty terrible, and the same thing will be said about his metal cooler portion of him. Both of these are unfortunately trapped to the crossover side of things. He's a full dodge unit and put the rest into additional. There's no point in giving him crit. He has no other actual teams other than heroes. You know, you could throw him technically on Metal Cooler's team, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to work. He does stack attack, and he raises defense for 1 turn. And he does have damage reduction up to 30% with each attack performed. So once again, there's no reason to give him crit. You just need to give him additional for that damage reduction. He does launch 2 additional attacks that each have a 50% chance of becoming a super. But you only can do that if you have 3 or more Dragon Ball Heroes category allies on the team. And he is a Dragon Ball Heroes category ally supporter. And then all allies key +2, attack and defense with 20%. He's not even a 30% supporter. He's a 20%. And I think that's the most difficult part I have about him is, like, even if you wanted to take him off of the team, off of heroes, you only have one other Wicked Bloodline unit to be throwing on to a team, and you need, what, 2 extras? So here's the thing. It says when there are another 3. So it means when it says 3 or more, it's not counting Cooler. It's counting other units. So including Cooler, you would need a total of 4 Dragon Ball Heroes units on a team in order to still give him this additional here. He's just full dodge. He's just full dodge or die unit. He's a Wicked Bloodline unit that could have really been nice for the Wicked Bloodline era of the game, and it was really disappointing that he was so restricted in 2022, because he would have been a very fine addition to what was one of the best categories in the game at the time. So, yeah, full dodge. We're just going to move on to Cooler, this Metal Cooler here. This is probably my least liked Heroes unit. And I'm not joking when I say that. This guy is probably my least liked one. I despise this Metal Cooler. I think he's worthless. Absolutely worthless. I could probably find a use for almost every one of the free-to-play units and so forth. But this guy? No. I can't find a single use for him. I cannot. Dodge, full dodge all the way. He greatly raises attack and defense. Attack and defense 200, another 80% turning super. He's got a 70% chance to additional. He's got 20% damage reduction. He's got an additional attack up to 200%. He's got an extra 40% damage reduction per crossover category ally on the team. And you would think with like 60% damage reduction that he would be good, right? You would think that. You would think that. But his defense is so bloody low. You know, hold the phone. Let me see if I can go find the defense calculations. This is how much I don't like this guy. Okay, so Meta Cooler is the one that will get, that'll do this, but Post Super, he's actually fine. Post Super, he's actually fine. You know, he's got up to 1 million defense, but he has to triple Super. So that means the additional in his passive has to proc, and the hidden potential one has to proc in order for him to actually hit this margin, and that's with 40% support on top of it. On a 200% team, and getting both Shocking Speed and Cold Judgment going off at the same time. So, but the thing is like when you're using him, you're probably only going to super one time. Only one time is probably what's going to happen. And he can be decent in a certain amount of areas, but he has to be on a full crossover team. And then you have to hope that you don't get to below HP of 20%, or else you're not going to be able to super, and then you'll have no defense. And that's the other thing about this guy is, like, he doesn't have a lot of great links. Yes, he has Shocking Speed and Shattering the Limit. Congrats. But all of his link partners are straight up other Metal Coolers, and you're never, ever going to be able to run this guy on other Meta Cooler teams. You're just not. It's not possible. This is his best link partner right here. This is it. This is his best link partner, is the other Golden Cooler. But they are such old and terrible units that you're just not going to be able to use them. You're just not going to. You can't use them outside of a crossover Heroes team. It's not possible, because if you lower that damage reduction any further and he only gets one super attack off, you're just dead. 60% damage reduction or not, you're stuck to a full crossover team, and he can only hit up to about 1 million defense. Almost 1 million defense. So don't get me wrong, I'm probably exaggerating excessively. And he can be better. But the amount of times I have used this guy and he supers one time and he only has the 40% damage reduction. Just no. He just is not good enough. He's just not good enough when he only supers one time. Because if he only supers one time, you're at 500k defense. Super attack comes in, you're dead. You're just straight up dead. He can't take normals. I'm giving him a lot of crap because he's a unit that can't be used on his most ideal team which is Wicked Bloodline and Metal Coolers. So I'm a little salty. If you didn't notice, like, I hate that they restricted him to a full crossover team, because this is an epic character in the anime manga of Heroes, and they restricted him to crossovers, and it just makes me mad. But either way, he's a full additional or full dodge. I ignore my hatred for the unit. But yeah, he's still a decent unit. Like I say, he's still an okay unit. He just has to be on a full crossover team, otherwise he's just not usable. So, anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. You already saw how to build with him with the Vegex how to build video, so if you want to go see that on how to build Vegex, I included this guy on there. Honestly, I didn't really go too much into it with him. He's just a Kamehameha Heroes unit, so he will be on those teams. Unfortunately, he is so old at this point that, you know, he needs full additional to be benefiting from his super attacks of raising attack and defense for 6 turns. It is a 50% boost that he does get, but he came out all the way out in 2021 for his EZA, and it just shows right here. It just shows. You can see it. He gets an extra defense up to 30% with each attack performed, and he has a 50% chance to launch an additional for only 5 turns, which is just straight up terrible. There's nothing here. He's got, like, no defense. He's got no damage reduction. He's got no nothing. So, although I like the unit, I think the art is amazing. I think he's cool. He is by no means a good character. So, obviously, full additional should be the way to go about him. And then put the rest into crit for free-to-play-esque content, because you can't take him into serious content almost at all. You can't even take this guy into, like, Super Battle Roads, I don't feel. Like, there's a couple Super Battle Roads you could force it. You know, float him off safely if potentially possible. But at the end of the day, he's basically only here for free-to-play content or stuff that you know he's going to just do some damage and get out of dodge, because that's what he needs to do. He just has almost nothing in his kit. He's too old, man. He's too old. It's unfortunate, because I really like this Gotenks. I think he's cool. And Super Saiyan 3 is one of my favorite forms. Is my favorite form. So the next one on the list is this fusion of Buu, Kid Buu, and Babidi. I think in the anime manga of Heroes, he actually absorbs Babidi, and he just gets this crazy amount of extra magic power. He is on a couple other teams. He is on Broly's team. He's on 21's team. And then, of course, he's on Heroes teams. But he's not, like, super crazy. His defense isn't insane. He does have greatly raised defense, and he's got a little utility with 50% chance to dodge. But otherwise, he's just barely kind of supporting allies by 50% attack. Otherwise, he just recovers 8% HP every turn, and he gets an additional defense of 100%. All allies do get 50% defense when HP is 81% or more, but more than likely, he's going to be the reason that you fall below 81% HP, and that'll just kind of suck. He does at least have Metamorphosis and Majin, so he does have a little bit of healing potential, being on with other Majins. I'm just trying to think of, like, what team he's going to take advantage of that, and I just don't really see a team where he's taking advantage of being a quote-unquote Majin. Because he's not 200% on Fat Buu's team. He's not 200% on any of the actual Majin teams other than 21's. And I just feel like there's better units to throw onto the team other than him. So he's a full dodge unit. Straight up, full dodge, and then put the rest into additional. Nothing else to be said there. This is probably the weakest unit of Heroes, probably. Yeah, I want to say Super Paikuhan is literally the weakest. Well, there's 200% options. Oddly enough, Battle of Wits, and then just Heroes, so no outside team usage. He does stack attack and defense, though, and he greatly lowers attack. So he does have some utility there, I will give him that. And he has a 50% chance to additional super when facing one enemy. He does have a 70% chance of additional super when facing 2 or more enemies. So the way that would work is if you're fighting 2 enemies, he killed one of them, and then it went down to 1, the 50% chance would actually proc moving forward with that. So he does have a chance of, like, triple quad supering, but the odds are very low. And then he gets another attack and defense of 60% when the enemy's in attack down status specifically. Overall, though, as you can see, he only has this for defense, and then this for defense, and then whatever he stacks. So he's got very absurdly low defense. He he does have shocking speed and Brainiacs, but more than likely you're not really getting any or all of his links off at one point. He links with other Paikuhans, of course, in the best way, but otherwise he only links with like some of the extreme units because Gentleman is used with a lot of antagonistic enemies, surprisingly, and not really too often is it a super unit. I wouldn't say he's crazy or good. So honestly, my full additional or full dodge are my only suggestions for use with this Paikuhan. And yes, I couldn't even find the original artwork for this guy, so I had to use the actual superheroes artwork on the side here. Moving on to the next unit. This next unit is Demigra Makioka. It's one of his weird, like, semi-demon forms, if you've seen him in Xenoverse. He has a couple options for teams. He's got Fat Buu. He is not 200% on Lord Slug's team, but I would suggest him for Lord Slug team as well. He has greatly raised attack and defense, and he is an extreme class supporter of defense plus 40%, and he does lower enemies' attack by 30%. I do think he has some utility here with lowering the enemy's attack and defense, and extreme class allies defense buff. So I do think you can utilize him a little bit. But overall, if you didn't notice, his kit's pretty tiny. I mean, it just shows right up on the screen right here. He doesn't really have much here. His defense isn't stupidly high. He is a supportive unit. That's what he is. He just supports, and then he moves on. So he's definitely a floater. But, you know, you could throw him onto the team with other demonic power units. We do have plenty of them. Lots of support going around for the demons. He actually would fit in very well links-wise. So he could be fun to run, at the very least, but overall, he's not very usable. He's pretty much dodge or die. Alright, next unit on here is, unfortunately, not very good. One of the last units we'll be discussing, like second or third last one, but Super Saiyan 3 Gohan. This unit was absurdly good for the time of release. Unfortunately, he's just not stood the test of time. In my opinion, he's just a full dodge unit and then put the rest into additional. I wish it wasn't that way because I love his artwork. But he's trapped to a full heroes team as 200% options go. He does raise attack for 9 turns, but I will tell you right now, even if you put him on a 200% team, you give him as much support as possible, your damage isn't really getting that high. It's getting up to like 8 million, maybe. His damage just does not go high enough to warrant this, unfortunately. It's really unfortunate. And he is very orb hungry, absurdly orb hungry, with needing 3 orbs just to get attack and defense 30%, 5 to get critical hit plus 30%, and 7 or more key spheres to get a damage reduction of 30%. With how low his defense is, no defense in super, he just has no need for that damage reduction because it does not help him. He cannot even tank a 700k normal. So yes, he is a pure dodge or die unit. Even if you link him up with like his best partner being the Super Saiyan 4 Gohan or other Super Saiyan 3 units, he's defensively so squishy that it's actually a little jarring. And one of the second to last units on here is Super Mira, also known as Glorio before Glorio was Glorio. He is a 200% on Heroes units and then on Android 21's team, oddly enough, because he is technically an artificial life form. He greatly stacks its defense, and then he greatly raises attack for 1 turn. He does disable enemy's guard, which is more useful than you might think. And then he does launch an additional attack when all allies attacking in the same turn are Dragon Ball Heroes units. And then he does lower the enemy's attack by 30% for 2 turns. And then he does have a chance of performing a critical hit, a 70% chance of performing a critical hit when the enemy is attack down or defense down status. So because he has this stacking ability, he can get up to a very respectable defense number. But I will say that without being on a Heroes team, he's not stacking enough. So as far as a Heroes team goes, he can definitely stack enough. But at the same time, you're never going to probably be getting all of his links off. Because yes, he's an android, time traveler, artificial life form unit. His best link partner is straight up himself, and you're never running him on the same team of Dragon Ball Heroes, because he's not a Dragon Ball Heroes unit. He's a crossover unit. But yeah, unfortunately, he's just... Wait, what the fuck? Hold on a second here. So, we got Android Assault, Demonic Power, Tough as Nails, Fear and Faith for the PUR. And then the SSR? Android Assault, Demonic, Tough as Nails, Nightmare, and Fear and Faith. So that's so funny. He links better with the SSR Mira than he does with the TUR. Because he loses Nightmare once he awakens, but then he gets it back once he transforms. Man, what a funky unit. What a funny unit. That's a funny unit right there. Anyways, yeah, I'd say he's a full additional unit because you want to stack that greatly raising defense. Like I said, if you can get his defense high enough, he's actually pretty nice. But otherwise, he's just dodge or die pretty much. And he's just there to stack. That's literally all he's there for. So potentially a burst mode down the line, you could take advantage of him. Just keep that in mind. Moving on to, I think, the last one? Yes, this is the last unit we'll be talking about in this group. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. No. This is just the last group. The Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta is not very good. He's actually pretty mediocre, unfortunately, and it's because his defense is just so low, and he doesn't really do much. He's a full additional unit, though. You definitely want to give him full additional at 55%. He's one of the few units in here that I'm giving a 55% build. But once you actually get him with dupes, full additional, and then either or put it into crit or dodge. So if we go ahead and go look at his kit, 200% options here. Once again, all heroes and then Vegeta family teams. Oddly enough, there's a lot of Vegeta family options here. I would say he's okay on other Vegeta teams, but I do think he is a little bit restricted. Greatly raises attack and defense and then greatly lowers enemies' defense. The lowering defense is nice, but it doesn't do an insane amount because it's only 50%. He has a 50% chance of launching a super for 3 turns. And another attack and defense 50%. He disables enemies' guard. That actually can be useful nowadays. And then he has a critical chance of up to 35% per hero's ally on the team. And that's it. That's it. That is the reason why he's not really useful. It's because he just doesn't really have anything going for him. He doesn't have guard. He doesn't have damage reduction. He's got a little bit of crit. He disables the enemy's guard. And he can do a couple additionals for like 2 turns. And that's it. That's it. That's Vegeta right there, unfortunately. It's very unfortunate because the Super Saiyan 3 Goku Xeno got a much better treatment with guard and damage reduction, whereas this Vegeta just does not add up to it. And they're like perfectly good link partners. You know, you had the Xeno Goku would be a slot 1, then you put the Xeno Vegeta at slot 2, and you'd have a decent combination of tanking in slot 1 and doing damage in slot 2, but unfortunately his defense is just not good enough to stay in age. You won't really see it above like 700 to a mil. But with no damage reduction or anything, he's very RNG. And after those first 3 turns, he loses the additionals, and it's downhill from there. He gets worse as the fight goes on, basically. Which is, you know, the theme of Super Saiyan 3 over in a flash, you know. So that is it for this group of heroes units. So we will now be moving on to the next set of heroes units. This next set of units is going to be what I consider to be more runnable. I feel like you can run these next set of units in actual bits of content, but they still fall short a little bit. A lot of these units are going to be decent defense-wise, but you're primarily going to be rocking them for their utility or for other specific reasons. And they do have some decent peaks, but they're just not good enough at the same time. So let me get that pulled up now. All right, so we're getting to the pretty close to the end. This is like the halfway point. roughly the halfway point. I would say we got a little bit 20-something more units to go. So, if you're still following along, appreciate you. Like, comment, subscribe, etc., etc. Anyways, so the next unit on here is going to be this Berserk Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan Vegeta. And as cool as he is, unfortunately, he's not as good as cool as he is. Yeah, words. He does have several other 200% options because he is Vegeta, so he has Vegeta teams and so forth. He has Saiyans Beyond the Limits, Realm of Gods kind of stuff, heroes, etc., etc. So he does have several other teams, but let's just take a look at his kit real quick. He does disable enemies guard, which is pretty nice. He does raise defense. He has built-in critical, like up to 50+%, so you do not need to give him crit. But it is per Dragon Ball Heroes category ally. That is something to keep in mind. He does get additional defense as long as he's performing super attacks up to 120. I cannot tell you how much that matters. Like, he does need to get his additionals in, or he just has no defense. Even at max buildup, this guy just doesn't have enough defense, unfortunately. He does get another additional 50% crit chance when facing one enemy, so he can potentially have a 100% chance to crit. So just keep that in mind, that, like, there's just no reason to give him crit. Once again, tech unit with built-in crit is crazy. He does have an additional built-in and high chance of evading enemies' attack when facing 2 or more enemies, and I would say that is where he shines the most, is that when he's fighting 2 or more enemies. If you're not fighting 2 or more enemies, he's not going to be shining very hard, unfortunately. He has your standard Vegeta, Super Saiyan-esque links, and he is on quite a few different categories. And he's not necessarily, you know, locked to a specific team, I would say. It's the Dragon Ball Heroes thing right there. If you're not actually on, like, a full Dragon Ball Heroes team, he doesn't get the extra critical, which is up to, like, 40% extra. And he does lose out on attack and defense of 50%. So he's not locked to heroes, but he is locked to heroes. It's really weird. So, I mean, he is good. It's just, he really takes a lot of focus, a lot of build-up on additionals in order to get to a defensively viable point. And his damage isn't so high to the point of where even if he was quad supering every single turn, he still wouldn't be that impressive because his damage is, like, below 10 million. So even if he quad supers, you're still, like, doing, like, 8, 16, 24. He gets up to a respectable amount, but what he can do in, like, 4 supers, a modern unit can do in, like, 1 or 2. So, like, he is decent, but he's not amazing. At the same time, I mean, he's still runnable. He's still good in multiple enemy-based fights, but I would still give him full additional to make sure his defense is up high enough, and then put the rest into additional. And maybe even mix it up a little bit, but just make sure that he does have a little bit of focus into additional to actually take advantage of how good he can be. Moving on to the next unit, which is going to be this Brainwashed, or Darkness Supreme Kai of Time. She's actually a very good utility-based unit. She's not going to be on a crap load of teams. It's primarily heroes and Realm of God stuff. But what you're bringing her along for is this greatly lowering attack and defense, and the fact that she massively raises her own defense. And then she has the most weirdest passive ever. She has a 20% chance to stun all enemies. She has all of these crazy built-in extra attack and defense of 100% when performing a super. If the enemy's in attack down, defense down, sealed, or stun status. Like, her damage can actually get pretty high. The thing is, like, she's not here to do damage. That's the thing. It's really weird. So ignore all of this crazy attack and defense 100s. Focus on the fact that she can seal the enemy's super attack for 2 turns. She has a chance to stun the enemy, and she lowers attack and defense. She has all of the utility basically in one. And that's pretty much what you use her for. Her actual link partners are just going to be more heroes, peppy gals, etc. But more than likely, you're never going to really be linking her up with anyone. This is a unit that you bring along to use for literally nothing but pure utility and stunning and sealing and lowering attack and defense. So when it comes to down to the additional point, I feel like getting her to additional super is more important than her dodging, because as long as she can keep the enemy's attack lowered or stunned or sealed, then she'll be safer in that regard. So if you're taking her into something that she's actually going to excel in, which is the ability to stun, seal, and attack defense lower, then you should be fine to just give her additional. There's not really much of a point to be giving her full dodge, because in those instances, unless it's just an absurd fight, like a blue zone or something, then you should be fine just stun locking, sealing, and lowering attack and defense. Next unit on the list is going to be Broly. So this Super Saiyan 4 Broly I did give 2 builds for, and I primarily did it because this is a misunderstood character. He's been misunderstood since he was EZA'd. But basically, he's a tech unit, so just give him more crit with your 55%. And then once you actually get him with dupes, or you have dupes for like a dupe for him, just aim towards more crit and then put the rest into additional. That's what I did with him, because I'm not going to bring him into something that he's not going to do good in. You can go ahead and just put the rest into dodge if you so wish. This guy has built-in additional, so if you're going to put anything rest into, it would be dodge. Or you can do a mixture of dodge and crit. Entirely up to you. But his damage can actually get pretty decent. And that's the reason why I gave him crit, because he doesn't have built-in crit. He can be on uncontrollable power with the new INT Broly, so he can definitely thrive a little bit on that team as far as thriving goes for a old hero's EZA. He greatly stacks his attack and raises his defense for 1 turn. And he greatly lowers enemies' defense. So, I mean, with additionals built in, the worst part of it, I think, about his kit is this. It's the Giant 8 power category ally. He needs to be on a Giant 8 he needs to at least have a Giant 8 power category ally attacking in the same turn. But yeah, he has built-in additionals, and he can actually get to a respectable damage number. So that's why I put the crit in, because if I bring him along, his purpose is to deal crit and do additionals. That's his purpose. Obviously, his best link partner is going to be himself, the Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Broly. But I will tell you honestly that the Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Broly is actually better than him. As far as like a Super Saiyan 4 ally to bring along, it's really tough. It really is tough to pick and choose one, because normally I would say it'd be this Vegeta, just because out of pure raw defense numbers. But it's just really difficult to find a team to bring another Giant 8 power ally with. And that is the other issue, is like you're missing out on half of his freaking passive if you try and take him onto the new Intelligence Broly's team. Because there's not really, I don't think I can think of, like at the top of my head, of a Giant 8 power ally you keep on rotation to actually make him usable. But yeah, personally, I feel like this should just be a damage dealing unit for content that he can actually go into. Otherwise, I wouldn't be delusional into thinking he can go into any actual hard, difficult content without just pure RNGesus on your side. But with that being said, we move on to his Limit Breaker form. And his Limit Breaker form is actually defensively weaker and offensively weaker, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. So for 55% of this Limit Breaker, I would just honestly suggest going full dodge into it, or give him some crit. And hope he does something. But yeah, once you get down into the actual additionals, that's pretty much all he can do, is that he can do a little bit of damage. So you give him the crit, and then you put the rest into additionals and hope he gets enough defense, or you just give him more dodge. And that's pretty much it. If we go into his kit right here, he's going to have all the same teams and everything as the other Broly. But he's got an additional 50% chance to super attack. And then he has another additional super attack he can use when fighting 2 or more enemies. Then he can launch another additional one when there's a fused fighter category enemy. So he has a very specific passive that goes for specific enemy fights. And you're just never going to have him at his peak. If you didn't notice, he doesn't really have much in here. Like, he just doesn't really. I'm actually kind of tempted to go pull up his defense numbers, because some people just might not believe how actually defensively not viable he is. So give me a sec here. Okay, so we're actually going to pull up the defense numbers for these Brolys. And I'm sorry to say, but when your max defense, when your penta supering is only 1 million, not good enough, bro. Nah. Especially not without damage reduction or guard. Like, that's just not good enough. I'm sorry. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I mean, these are calculations at 55% that he did do. You know, and in that case, that's not too bad when you think about it. But he's still not hitting too high, you know? It's still not going too high, unfortunately. So, with the fact that he has so much RNG to get his additionals off, when fighting 2 or more enemies and fighting a fused fighter enemy, it's too much RNG for a very specific type of fight to get to that low of defense. And more than likely is like you can't put him in slot 1, so he's not guaranteed to even get his additionals off. Meanwhile, this Broly right here, with less supers, can get to about the same number, but he actually has a higher damage ratio because he greatly raises his attack on super, whereas this Broly only raises his defense for 4 turns. So, on one hand, yes, his defense can get to an okay state. It's just not good enough for the current state of the game. So he's on very kind of back-end kind of fights. He can't be in slot 1. And he has to always have, like, the constant keeping up with the build-up. Otherwise, if you lose a stack and he doesn't build up and you just skip a turn, that could cost you the entire fight. Like, it's not a good enough defense. He is fun to use. It's fun to see all the additionals go off. He's can actually mix on a couple different teams. But at the same time, unfortunately, I just don't feel like either of these two are like viable enough to be going into current content. It's that they're here. You bring these two along for multiple enemy fights and to just do additionals and hopefully do enough damage to just wipe out majority of the enemies in multiple enemy fights. So, with that all being said, we will move on to the next one, which is going to be Cumber over here. This Cumber is not that bad, but he's not good either. He's a giant ape unit. So he is on actually he's not really on too much about anything else. he can actually go on to uncontrollable power lead with Broly there, and then he can go on to like Vegeta's team. Those are options because he is technically Super Saiyan. He greatly raises attack and defense, and he greatly lowers attack and defense, and that's pretty much it right there. The primary reason I've seen people use this guy is in like Super Battle Road giant ape form. And that's primarily for the fact that he has a 50% chance to stun super class enemies after receiving an attack. I will tell you, it's pretty crazy when the first hit that hits him, and then all of a sudden, and all the enemies on the field are stun locked. So it is interesting to use him, and he automatically crits when the enemy is stunned. So bring this guy into fights where you can stun lock, and just let him go off. Now, is he a good damage dealer? Is he a good tank? Heck no. But he has that utility of stunning, and I think that shouldn't be ignored. I think that's what his primary focus is. Otherwise, he is basically a full dodge unit otherwise. So that is just something to keep in mind with this guy, is that he is primarily a full dodge unit. But at the same time, if you're taking him into the correct type of content where you need to stun lock and so forth, then full additional is what you want to do. Greatly lowering attack and defense, stun locking, and moving on. So, we'll move on to the next slide, which is for a newer unit. I will say this guy is very misunderstood. I will say that the Warrior in Black is a very misunderstood unit. He is actually good, but he's good in very specific situations. Emo Bardock is what I call him, but if you have 55%, just give him additional. There's no reason not to give him additional. He gets everything else in his passive. I will say, you're either going to go with a full dodge and then full additional, or you're going to go with a full additional and full dodge. It's entirely up to you which way you want to go about with this guy. I'm just going to be honest with you there. But he needs to be on very specific teams to work. Basically, you either need to put him on a full heroes team, or on Super Saiyan Vegeta's team. Super Saiyans with Super Saiyan physical trio getting that defense support is what's going to matter. Greatly raising attack and defense, greatly lowering attack and defense. He has the utility there. The hardest thing about I have with him is that he needs to get a final blow. So in multiple enemy fights is where he excels. You want to do that, make sure he gets a final blow on one of the multiple enemies so he can do additional supers. And then the real reason why people don't like this guy is because when you're at full HP versus an enemy, he has really low stats. When the enemy's on low HP, all of a sudden he looks insane. Well, I wouldn't say insane, but he looks good at least when the enemy's on lower HP. Because he gets up to a 60 or 70% damage reduction marker. He's performing like double, triple supers. He's getting crits. He's lowering the enemy's attack and defense. And all of that is happening when the enemy has lower attack and defense. Or he gets a final blow. It is a very specific situation where this Bardock can look good. And I would argue to say that this is probably the best Bardock in the game. Oddly enough. Like, Bardock is just not good as a unit in Dokkan. Like, he's just never good enough, is what I'm saying, unfortunately. But I feel like in a very specific situation, he could be pretty dang good. So, full additional or full dodge, entirely up to you. Personally, I'm leaning on additional and just taking him into what he's going to be good at. So, but we will move on to the next unit. Alright, so we are moving on to the next unit, which is going to be Super Saiyan 4 Gohan. So this actually used to be one of my favorite heroes units up until a meta curve happened, and then all of a sudden he's just not insanely impressive any longer, unfortunately. So with the Super Saiyan 4 Gohan, he does have same options as pretty much all the rest of them, other than like Ultimate Gohan's team. So he doesn't have a terrible amount of options. He has a 150 Giant Ape power leader. He raises attack and defense, and he massively lowers enemies' defense. I will say the massively lowering defense can be a nice thing to be utilizing. He does have attack and defense 200. He reduces damage received by 50% when there are 2 or more Giant Ape power category allies on the team. And then he has another 50% chance of stunning the attacked enemy when forming a super attack. Unfortunately, that is only for the turn. It is not a 2-turn lock. And then he does have an additional attack plus 100% when there's another crossover category ally attacking in the same turn. But unfortunately, that is it. And unless he's getting an additional super off, his defense just isn't crazy. His defense is probably about sub of 600-700k. And yes, 50% damage reduction does go a long way. So he does survive normals. But as soon as a super attack comes out, man, even a 1.5 million super, you're going to take damage. Yeah, it's unfortunate. You are going to take damage even from a 1.5 million super. I would still say he's usable, but just not in the hardest levels of content. He is still a decently good tank for a Giant Ape power. He's primarily a unit that is a good linking partner for a lot of heroes units, as you can see right here. I mean, he is the staple leader skill for Super Saiyan 3 Gohan, or not leader, but a link for even Giant Ape Cumber, for Emo Bardock, for Super Saiyan 4 Bardock, and even for the Super Saiyan 4 Limit Breaker Goku. He is usable. He has Saiyan Lineage, Saiyan Roar, Prayer for Battle. He is pretty good still for a defensive unit. I would just say he is no longer a slot 1 unit, and he is still stuck to slot 2 or even floating. He can survive normals, and he's just kind of there for the team. But overall, he has a little bit of utility, and he's just kind of borderline right now. I was really, really hoping he was going to get an easy A for the last Heroes celebration. They were just going to throw it in, but they did not. I think in this climate of Dokkan, if he got an easy A today, he would be very good. With 50% damage reduction already, the only logical thing left to do is to either give him more defense, either give him guard, more damage reduction. He can literally only get better. So if Akatsuki keeps their word and says that these units can still easy A in the future, then this Gohan has one of the highest potential uses out of all the remaining easy A's left in the Heroes category. So, if you do have this unit, no matter what, at the end of the day, he is a defensive unit. So a 55% option build should just be straight up full dodge. I would even argue to give him a potential defense orb, but as of right now, it's not going to make too much of a difference. But I do feel once you get dupes into him, just give him a defense orb, give him full dodge, maybe even an additional orb to make sure you get that additional super attack off that increases defense for that damage reduction. But otherwise, he's pretty much a full dodge unit. Full dodge or full additional, even in the future if he easy A's. I don't see his kit going any other direction. There's no way he's going to turn into a damage dealer. He might do damage if he ever easy A's, but no matter what, he's going to be a full-on defensive unit. So it's either additional or dodge is what you should be going for this guy. Let's go ahead and get it along, guys. This is one unit that I did not give a 55% build for. I considered it. Great Saiyaman 3 is actually usable in certain ends of content. It just really depends on what you got to take him into. He is a counter unit, and this is why his kit is the way it is. If you give this Great Saiyaman dodge, you can't read. I'm sorry. That was rude. That was rude. That was freaking bloody rude. I'm sorry. But I'm not joking. I'm not joking at the same time. His 200% options are still kind of stuck to heroes and hybrid Saiyans because technically this is Trunks. Great Saiyaman 3 is Trunks, spoiler alerts. He is a superclass Ki plus 3 100% leader. He raises attack and defense, and he raises superclass allies attack by 30%. So he is supporting superclass allies by 30%. Ki plus 3 attack and defense 130, plus another additional attack and defense plus 30% chance of forming a critical hit, plus 3% per time traveler category ally on team. So he really wants to be on a full heroes or time travelers. He does lose defense after receiving an attack. He has plus additional attack and defense plus 10% with each attack received up to 30%, so he gets that defense back. But damage received from normals is minus 30%, and he counters with tremendous power. This right here is the primary reason you use Great Saiyaman 3. Right here. The countering. That is the only reason you use him. Therefore, you counter, you crit, you do damage. You do additionals, you raise your defense, you increase allies' attack by 30%. That's the only reason you use them. For those counters specifically. There's very niche, small bits of the content in the game that you can actually really take advantage of these counters. But at the end of the day, you can take advantage of it. It is an option, but there's just no reason to be giving him dodge. Dodge only hurts his usability as a unit. Dodge defies the purpose of him as a unit. He is a counter-based unit. You do not counter after a dodge. Unless I'm wrong. If somebody's got a clip of this guy countering after he dodges, please do tell me. Please do tell me and show me. Link it. Link a video. Let me see it. And I will completely... I'll make a pinned comment saying to, ignore what I said in this video. And he's a full dodge unit at that point. But, he's not a full dodge. At that point, he's still a crit unit, but at that point I would ignore the additional and then put the rest into dodge. I think no matter what, at the end of the day, regardless of dodging and countering, he is still a counter-based unit, and as a counter-based unit, he needs that critical to even have any purpose of being used. Because his defense isn't what you're bringing him for. He doesn't do an insane amount of damage, just like TEQ UI. TEQ UI doesn't do a crap ton of damage. No. TEQ UI counters and does damage. That's what he does. And that's how it's always been with counter-based units. Counter-based units do damage on DPS level based on their counterattacks. And that's the reason you use Great Saiyaman 3. So, moving on to the next unit is going to be Hearts. So, Hearts is a fan favorite. He's my favorite. He is Dio. He has the same voice actor as Dio, which in the recent update of Dragon Ball Heroes in Dokkan, he actually got his voice finally in Japanese if you use the Japanese voices. So I'm happy about that. And he is a fun unit. He's a cool unit. Unfortunately, I don't think he's amazing. He is a big bad boss unit. He does have some usability. And he has very many different ways to build his kit. Let's go over him a little bit real quick. He's a 200%. He could be on a couple different teams. Oddly enough, a 200% on Arutagard and Heroes primarily. He is a time traveler and Dragon Ball Hero 170 leader, and 200% for any crossover units. So oddly enough, he's a decent leader, in all given honesty. Raises attack and defense for 1 turn, 30% chance to stun, so he has utility, though 30% is pretty low. Plus an additional attack and defense of 50% on top of the 150 when forming a super. Guards all attacks for 5 turns for the character's entry, and another additional defense of 50% when guard is activated. He is buffing extreme class allies by key plus 1 attack and defense of 30%, and another key plus 2 attack and defense plus 20% for all allies, and medium chance of stunning all enemies again when all allies attacking the same turn are extreme class. Crossover categoried characters. So yes, he is a very, very highly specific restricted unit. Arguably, the last part of his passive is not required, but you are definitely going to want to take this guy into content that you can stun lock in, as so long as you can use a full crossover team. Now, he does have an actual transformation. This can be activated from the 3rd turn if all allies are extreme class, or starting from the 5th turn from the start of battle after receiving 5 more attacks. Basically, I would wait to transform him until after the natural guard restriction has worn off. So after 5 turns. So if it hits turn 6 and you got him turn 1, then you can go ahead and transform him into ultimate hearts. And I think that would be fine. But at the same time, I would highly advise that you only transform him at the end of the fight and you're planning to finish off the boss. Greatly raises attack and then raises defense for 1 turn. He's got a 50% chance of stun at that point. So if you are trying to stun lock, maybe it would behoove you to actually transform him sooner. He guards all for 1 turn. E plus 2 attack and defense 200. He has a 50%. He launches an additional super attack when all allies are extreme class. And then he actually disables enemies guard when all allies are extreme class crossover. And he has attacks effective against all types when there is a Realm of Gods category enemy. So he does have quite a bit, but the thing about Hearts that kind of throws me off and other people off is that he appears to be a defensive unit, and then all of a sudden he goes into a damage area. Because he can actually have a respectable amount of damage of like 10, 13 million. You know, with additionals, he can actually do some damage. So what I would suggest is you really choose how you want to use this Hearts. Are you going to use him for his base state and just kind of use him defensively, stuns, guard, support, or are you going to try and use them for damage? Because they're completely 2 different ways to use this unit, and it just highly depends. There's a full additional build to get more defense and to do more attacks, and then put crit into him so that he can actually do more damage. Because the thing is, like, he has no built-in crit. Yeah, attack's effective against all types, but that's only if you're fighting a Realm of Gods enemy, which is not going to be that often. So there is that to consider. But once again, if you're just going to be using him for his support and kind of a little bit of defensibility with guard, then obviously at that point you're either going to go for full additional or full dodge or a mixture of the 2. But you really got to choose between the 2. Are you going to try and do damage with him, or are you going to bring him for a defensive option? Personally, at this point, it doesn't matter, because until he easy A's, we don't know how he's going to go. His kit is so specific that I do really feel like he could actually go either way. They could just keep him as a primary defensive option, or once he transforms, they could give him crit, but then all of a sudden that critical you put in could have been worthless. But I don't know. At the time of writing, right now, he's just kind of a mid, kind of not a mid unit, but he's like, he does it all kind of thing. He technically tanks a little bit. He technically does a little bit of damage. He technically supports. You know, and when he came out, he was actually pretty good, and he was good for quite a long time. And I really do still like this unit, and I was really hoping they were going to easy aim this time around, but unfortunately, they did not. So, please, do let me know how you did build Hearts specifically, because I'm kind of curious how people build Hearts, because even I have no idea how to exactly build Hearts, because he's just so specific. So, let's move on to the next unit, which is going to be this Masked Saiyan Vegeta, or Black Masked Saiyan is what they call him. Honestly, I struggled to bother putting him in this group of units, and I wanted to put him in the group before, which I thought were just kind of meh units. And he kind of is that way, but let's look over his kit. He is a Vegeta family unit, so he does go on Vegeta family teams. And he is a 130 Heroes lead or Extreme AGL lead. he raises attack and defense, and he lowers enemies' attack and defense. So he has a little utility there. He has keep of 3 attack and defense 160 when attacking. He's got another 120 and launches in a 50% chance of doing a super and 50% chance of throwing a crit. And there are another 3 or more crossover category allies on the team. And then he performs a crit automatically when fighting a Goku. So the only reason I didn't put him in the category before is because as he is, he can actually do some damage, especially if you're fighting a Goku. He can be launching additionals and critting. And he's just kind of like a straightforward kind of unit to be launching additionals, lowering attack and defense, and doing criticals on a Goku enemy. He's a very specific type of unit to be using. His links aren't amazing. He's the literal perfect linking partner with the Black Mask King, which is a very good unit actually. But at the same time, you're probably not going to be utilizing this guy too often, if at all, in all given honesty. I wouldn't say he's crazy. I wouldn't say he's bad either, in all honesty, because at his peak, he's not too bad. He's not worthless. He has some purpose and some use, but he's okay. Full dodge. Full dodge is pretty much what I would suggest, and then put the rest into additional. He is an AGL, so he'll have a little bit of room for additionals in there at the very least. But overall, he's just kind of there. He's just kind of there. He's neither good. He's neither good nor bad. So, moving on to the next unit, which is going to be the Supreme Kai of Time. Oppai of Time, for those that were there during the time. She's a straight-up full dodge unit. Full dodge, and then put the rest into additional. I think she can get to a respectable defense of like 700k, potentially, and that's purely because she massively raised attack and defense. She doesn't really have any teams, though. It's just heroes. It's literally just straight-up heroes or Realm of Gods. She is a supportive unit, massively raising her attack and defense by 100% and sealing the enemy. So if you can seal the enemy, you can probably find a use for her. She does support all allies by Ki plus 3, attack and defense plus 40%. And I think she was a pioneer of the time, but I think she pioneered giving units critical hit plus 12%. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure she was one of the first modern-esque units to actually be supplying critical to her allies. And then great chance of additional attack plus 12%, and then great chance of additional defense plus 12% for all allies. So she can potentially be supporting by 52% for attack and defense for allies, and then she recovers HP at the end of the turn. But that's pretty much it. She doesn't do an absurd amount of damage. There's not really much point in giving her crit. She's just a freaking support unit, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the only issue I have is, like, there's no real reason to be linking her with anybody. She's just a floating support unit, and that's about it. Yeah, she's just a support unit. Even if she didn't give the 12% crit chance or the support, she's just kind of there, man. Seals and doing okay-ish. So I wish she was a little bit better, in all honesty. I wish she had a little bit more to her EZA. Maybe a little damage reduction, maybe a little dodge. A little dodge would have went a long way with her. But she's a full dodge unit and needs a super to even take normals. So we're going to move on to Robelu, which I feel like could be infinitely better if they just changed one thing about her kit. At the end of the day, she's straight up a full dodge unit 100% through and through, and then just put the rest into additional. This is another unit I kind of was hoping she was going to EZA. She can't be 200% on Peppy Gals and Android 21 and Roshi team. Other than that, she's a full heroes only unit. Greatly raises attack and defense, and she seals, so she's got some utility. The big thing about her, though, is that she Rainbow Orb changes. She's got a 50% dodge chance, and she has a 70% chance of using Scouter when there's a Dragon Ball Heroes category ally in the same turn. That Scouter, it's hard to come by with a Scouter unit. I'm not going to lie to y'all. It is very difficult to come by Scouter units that are actually usable and good. And I feel like if she EZAs, she will just have straight up Scouter, and she will be a Rainbow Orb changer. So literally, if she EZAs next year, she could be 100% useful. 100% useful. I don't think that is anything to say no to. She's just going to be a full dodge, Scouter, Rainbow Orb changing unit that seals. And I think as a utility-based Peppy Gal unit, I think that she's pretty good. I have used her in a select amount of content. to utilize her for that rainbow orb changing and the seals and the scouter effect specifically. And the scouter doesn't always go off. It's only 70%, but it does go off a respectable amount, at least for me. So, moving on to the next one is going to be Silas. So, Silas used to be absurdly good, and I do mean that. He used to be very good. He still is kind of good. I did decide to give him a 55% build, in which at a 55%, I would just suggest giving him a 7 dodge. But once you actually, get him awakened, you need to make a choice to either go full additional or full dodge, or go full additional and put the rest into crit. Those are the two options, and the reason for this is because he actually has 2 different forms. So his 200% leader options are literally just heroes, basically. Merge Zamasu and then LR Final Form Cooler. He does raise defense on Super and greatly lowers the enemy's defense. He is an artificial life form time traveler, support unit, and he's got 50% chance to dodge in base. Now here's the thing about him that makes him actually, this is his weakest point about his unit other than his general that he's old. He is forced to transform starting from the 5th turn. This is a big bad boss, Thirst for Conquest, Shocking Speed, Brainiac's unit. He can link pretty well with a lot of units outside of heroes, but primarily with heroes, obviously. If they didn't force you to fuse into this fused Silas, he would be immensely better and more usable. But once you transform him, he raises defense, massively lowers enemy's defense, but he loses the chance to dodge. Yeah, he loses the chance to dodge. He performs a crit when the enemy is in attack down or defense down status, and then he launches an additional attack that has a 50% chance of becoming a super attack. So the only reason I gave crit as an option is because at the 5th turn of battle, you have hit a point where you're just not going to be able to lower attack and defense. In a majority of fights in the game, even if you are able to lower attack and defense, by the time it hits the 5th attack in battle, or the 5th turn, you're just not able to lower attack and defense. So it kind of defies the purpose of that ability of his, and it makes it so it's only used in very highly specific areas of the game where he would transform and be able to take immediate usage of that. So, although yes, this is probably a waste of a build right here, at the same time, he's not defensively good enough anymore to really consider into like actual serious content anyways. I feel like the additional and then the rest into dodge is the safest bet, because although defensively he's not terrible, he's still a full dodge kind of unit, especially in his base. Like in his base, he does have the 50% dodge chance. He's just a supportive unit. But when he transforms, he can actually do some decent damage. But if he's not doing crits, then that's when he's suffering, and that's when you're suffering. But at the end of the day, I do feel like he's primarily like a link battery. That is what I have used him as, in all honesty. I've used him as a link battery that can do some decent damage in certain areas of content, primarily like Ultimate Clash, Battlefield, and Super Battle Roads. That is the primary area that I have utilized him for, is lowering attack, defense, and so forth and henceforth. So I am a little bit curious how you guys have decided to use Silas. Did you go for like just full additional and dodge and additional? Did you give him crit because you didn't want to have to be stuck to that lowering attack and defense restriction? Let me know. So, moving on to the next unit, which you probably saw just a second ago, is going to be Super Fu. So Super Fu is kind of cool, and that's about it. He's just a full dodge unit. Literally, that's all he is. He's just a full dodge unit. Full dodge, put the rest into additional. He doesn't have crazy amount of defense. I will say on like probably like a Lord Slug team, with Domain active, with support from other demonic power allies, he can probably get to a respectable number, but he's not going to be really on a heroes team. Unfortunately, that's his own primary. That's basically the only good 200% team he'll be on. Otherwise, it's all 170s. He does seal, so he does have utility, and that's about it. but he does get extra defense and so forth after evading. He does want to be on a full Time Traveler's team, though, so he can suffer a little bit there as well. But yeah, I just wish that he wasn't as restricted as he is, because Cold Judgment, Brainiacs, Demonic Power, these are all links that are getting better day by day. But for the most part, he is just straight up a hero's unit to be throwing onto a team, and that is about it. He is just a full dodge unit, unfortunately. So, moving on to the next unit, which is, we're getting pretty close to the end of this group, the Super Saiyan 3 STR Xeno Goku. One of my favorite units, in all honesty, from the Heroes set. I wish that he didn't age as badly as he did. He was pretty good for a while. I mean, this EZA came out in 2022, and up until this year, I feel like he was solid for the end of 2022, solid to be usable in certain areas in 2023, but now we're just at a point where it's just not, he's just not good enough. 55%, just give him dodge, and then once you get dupes into him, or if you ever get dupes in him, just give him full dodge and then put the rest into crit. You're probably wondering, Joe, why wouldn't you give him additionals? Well, the reason I'm not going to give him additionals is because he doesn't have any defense on super, so it doesn't benefit him any. As far as 200% options go, you can throw him onto other teams outside of Heroes, because he's Goku. He's got Kamehameha, Roshi, etc. But the problem is that in order to get part of his passive, which is to get 35% damage reduction, you have to be on a full Dragon Ball Heroes team, and I have tested it a couple times. You can't go anything less than a full Dragon Ball Heroes team. In certain areas, maybe like early Super Battle Roads and a couple other category-specific fights, you can probably get away with it. But otherwise, he needs to be on a full Heroes team, get that full 35% damage reduction, mixed with that extra damage reduction for 3 turns. It's just kind of very much needed. He does also guard all attacks, and that's why he was so good. Honestly, if this guy got a potential Super EZA, which will never happen, they could just give him defense on Super, and he would be amazing. Really, he really would. The defense on Super is what makes him not as good as he could be. So, full dodge and put the rest into crit because he doesn't get anything for his additionals. So, and I think we only have one more unit to... No, I think we might have 2. Yeah, we have 2 more units to go through on this set. This next unit is Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Limit Breaker Goku. I think he's good, but the thing about this Goku is that he has to be run with this Vegeta right here. If you're not rocking these two together, they're a completely different set of unit. And individually, I don't feel like these two do well without one or another. And that hurts. It really does. It really hurts. Hopefully, next year, they'll give an EZA for them, and they'll just be better. But unfortunately, they need to be run next to each other. He just raises attack and defense. He does have damage reduction of 30% when all allies attacking in the same turn are full power or Dragon Ball Heroes category characters. That is going to be the difficult thing, is you either run him on a full power or full Dragon Ball Heroes team. He does give allies defense plus 40% when there's an ally whose name includes Vegeta on the same attacking turn, which is very nice. And then he does get an additional defense plus 40% and performs a crit starting from the character receiving the 7th attack in battle. I will say you really feel this right here. This defense plus 40%, oddly enough, really makes a difference somehow. I don't know why it does, but that extra 40% really does just make a big difference in his defensive ability. But as I said, primarily you have to run him with the other Vegeta in order for him to be defensively viable enough. Otherwise, there's just not really any other set of units that you could be running with him that will really help him out too much in this day and age. He's not terrible. You can still utilize him. You can still have other partners. He still has some usability with full power. But at the end of the day, he's very picky. And if you don't get him built up correctly, he could be the reason you lose a fight. And then we'll just go ahead. Well, hold on. Sorry, I'm like trying to force my way through this. His 55% build is going to be additional. Just go full additional. And then put the rest into dodge. That is the best way to build this Goku, is just full additional to make sure he has enough defense to even survive, and then put the rest into additional. I would say full dodge, but at the end of the day, you have more odds of pulling off an additional to get just enough defense to survive normals and very select few amount of super attacks than you do with full dodge, just dodging everything. I would suggest giving a defensive orb, though. A defensive orb should go pretty far with this Goku, I feel. Yeah. So we move on to Vegeta. Vegeta is a little bit less impressive. 55% just give him the level 12 additional, as he is a physical unit, so you can get up to 12. Once again, full power Super Saiyan 4 or Vegeta family heroes teams. He is a decent leader of crossover Giant Ape. Still only 200% for heroes units, though. He only raises attack and defense, and then that's pretty much all that he does in general. All he does is support allies by 40% attack if there's a Goku in the same turn, and he launches additional super attack when all allies attacking in the same turn are Super Class Giant Ape or Dragon Ball Heroes category allies. So, I mean, he's not super locked to a specific team, but his kit is so specific and it's so sensitive on the amount of additionals he needs to be good that I just don't feel like it's good enough. He can disable enemies' guard, and that's about it. Overall, his damage isn't super impressive, and his defense is not super impressive either. So he's just kind of in the middle, where he's kind of good, but not good. I would say just give him full additional, take him into content he can be good in, and then put the rest into crit or dodge. Probably crit if you actually want him to do any damage at all. Because at this point, I don't think I would... he's not a defensive unit, but he's also not a supportive unit either. So I would say if you don't give him crit, then he's just not really doing anything at all. I'd still give him a defense orb, though, just to make sure that his defense goes high enough to be able to survive. But yeah, he's very additional dependent, in my personal opinion. And once again, just like the Goku, he wants to be ran next to the other Super Saiyan 4 Limit Breaker Goku, or at the very least, some other heroes Vegeta to get all of those links off. Because I will say this about these two units, about this Goku and Vegeta, is that these two having their links going off are two different units. They are very weak if they don't have all their links going off, but they're pretty okay-ish as long as they're having their links going off. So that's going to be it for this group of units. I am going to do one last group of heroes units, which the next coming group of units are going to be the units that I feel are literally the best of the best heroes units that are usable outside of just a pure heroes team or even on just a whole heroes team. My point is, the next set of units are probably a good league above these ones. Alright, so we're getting to the final set of units for this giant how to build video, and it's killing me a little bit. Most of these units going forward are going to be ones that already have build videos. If you so choose to want to see their defense numbers and some other bits, please go take a look at my how to build playlist. You can see the rest of these in there. We're going to be going over units like the Universe Tree Goku, Limit Breaker Vegeta, Eos, the recent EZAs, and a couple other units that most of them have build videos. But some of these guys don't have build videos, so you might want to keep looking or just kind of look in the description below to see which ones you want to take a look at. So now, the first one on the list is going to be Eos. Eos is a very good dodge, not necessarily die unit, but she definitely is a full dodge built unit, as you can see here on the right side of the screen. Full dodge, and then put the rest into additional. There's no reason to give her crit. She's not doing a crazy amount of damage. As far as 200% options go, she is an extreme unit, so you could, throw her on Fusion Zamasu's team, Heroes team, etc. She is just support, so you don't need to necessarily go crazy and have her on a 200% team, in my opinion. She does seal, so she has a little utility there. She gets additional defense before, when she receives an attack, and if there's a crossover category ally attacking in the same turn when receiving an attack, she gets a bunch of additional defense, and it does add up pretty good. She does get well over 1 million defense. She also lowers enemies' attack and defense by 24%, and she has a 30% chance of stunning enemies at the start of turn. just keep in mind that stun is only for the turn. That is it. She does have a 50% chance to dodge, and then she gets another additional chance to dodge at 10%, which gets you up to 60% dodge, and then she actually builds up damage per dodge. The damage is nice, but it doesn't really do much for her. She does support all allies by 40%, and then an extra 24% for crossover category allies, plus an extra key. So 64% chance for crossover allies. Pretty nice, but 40% for everyone else. Recovers 24% HP at the end of the turn in which an attack was received. I still am not 110% clear if that 24% HP recovery is relevant to if she dodges a received attack. You never know what it is. It always changes back and forth between a lot of units. So, as far as her links go, she's not going to really be linking with anybody, at least nobody relevant. So her links are a little bit like, you know, they're not the main point of her as a unit. But it is nice. Some of them are like Cold Judgment, Godly Power, and so forth. So, full dodge unit. We'll move on to the next one. The next unit is going to be Fu. Definitely one of my favorite support units, but at the same time, also one of the most RNG heavy. 55% just give him full-on level 7 dodge, and then once you actually get him with dupes, more dodge. He is a straight-up support dodge or die unit. I will say he can definitely tank normals, potentially, but overall, he is just a support unit. He does have a little bit more options, like TEQ UI's team, but I wouldn't suggest it. I think his primary home is definitely going to be either on like Lord Slug's team on a 170 team, or on Fusion Zamasu's team. As far as his super attack, he raises defense and he seals super attack, so there's utility in there. He has additional attack and defense 150 when attacking. He supports extreme class allies by 30%, and he randomly changes key spheres to STR key spheres when there are another 3 or more crossover allies on the team. So I'd say this is the worst part about Fu's passive, unfortunately. So I would definitely say you need to have 3 other crossover category allies on the team. If you do not have the other 3 crossover category allies on the team, so a total of 4, including Fu, I feel like without his orb changing, he can be kind of lackluster. Because he needs the orb changing in order for the rest of his passive, which is chance of evading enemies attack up to 50%, and extreme class allies, E+1 up to 5, and additional attack and defense +4 up to 20 per STR or rainbow key sphere obtained. Whichever key sphere is collected, more will be counted. So before, they actually changed this, I believe. It used to be both, or at least we assumed it was. It is now either or. So you do not necessarily want both rainbow and STR key spheres. You want either 5 STR key spheres or 5 rainbow key spheres. It is dang near impossible to be having 5 rainbow key spheres. So if you only collect 4 rainbow key spheres, you're not getting the maximum amount there, unfortunately, and it would only give him 40% chance to dodge. He does only have 50% chance to dodge if you get 5 rainbow or 5 STR key spheres. So full dodge is needed, if not demanded. And it's really rough sometimes because it's literally a coin flip. You know, 50% chance is a coin flip, but he's got such good support and seal, and you know, good links with the demonic power and demon-esque characters. I really do like this Fu, and he is still very much usable. He's still a very good unit. He still holds up. Moving on to the next unit, which is going to be the TEQ Demigra that just released. This guy's a full slot 1 tank-esque unit, but I cannot stress enough that you need to give him defense orbs. He definitely needs defense orbs because he doesn't get defense on super, and he doesn't raise defense on super. So you really need to give him defense orbs and then put the rest into dodge, because that's all he does. He's here to either tank in slot 1, and that's it. Although I will say that Demigra does have some supportive capabilities, which is very interesting. I'd say his home is primarily going to be on Fusion Zamasu's team, maybe even Fat Boo's team. But Heroes team is just not where it's at for him. He wants a full extreme team specifically. He greatly raises attack for 1 turn, and he raises extreme class allies defense by 30% for 1 turn as well. So yes, slot 1 definitely. I will say with a good link partner and support, his damage can get up to about 20 million on full rainbow. But 20 million is, you know, 20 million, that's okay. That's good damage, especially with the fact that he has a 50% chance to crit built in. And as I said before about units, you don't need to give him crit if they got 50% chance built in. He has 40% damage reduction naturally. He gets another 20 when there's another crossover demonic power category ally attacking in the same turn. And then he gets another 20% damage reduction before attacking when all allies attacking in the same turn are extreme class. So he has 80% damage reduction before attacking. But after, he's only got 60% damage reduction. His defense only hits to about 700. About 700, 800k if you have defense orbs, domain, support, etc., perfect links. So I really cannot stress enough when I tell you he needs defense orbs to get better defense. He does get damage built up, kind of like Fusion Zamasu after each attack received, and that's what I said. Once fully built up there, you can get up to about 18, 20 million point. If you put him in slot 2, he will support extreme class allies by 60% and give performing a critical hit plus 24% as a second or third attacker in a turn. I can't tell if that's giving allies a 24% chance to crit or if it's 60% attack only to extreme class allies, but it sure reads like it's doing that. But yeah, he's pretty good as a slot 1 unit in my personal opinion. He's got big bad bosses and Fear and Faith and Revival. He's got some decent links, and he links with one of my favorite new heroes units after Easyang, which is Mechibora. So yeah, and he's very good link partner with the new youthful Fu, which is Kid Fu, and I think he's just fantastic. But overall, no matter what, regardless of how you feel about this guy, he's a full dodge additional put on defense orb unit, in my personal opinion. Now moving on to the next unit, kind of the polar opposite here is Super Saiyan God Trunks. He's a full additional unit in my opinion, so as a 55% option, I would highly suggest you just give him level 7 additional with your orb equips. And then once he gets to his, once you get him dupes, just still lean into the additionals or just give him full dodge. It's one or the other. This guy is additional dependent. He absolutely needs to additional to even have any defense. He needs to additional to do any damage. He needs to additional. That's kind of the way he just is. I would say just go ahead and give him an HP orb. He does have a decent HP. So there is something there. And I don't feel like a level 2 additional or a level 2 dodge would really go too much further into hoping that it will help him. As far as his teams go, he is on several different teams because Bond Master and Disciple, Realm of Gods, etc. But the problem with Trunks is that he has to be run on a full Time Traveler team or Dragon Ball Hero team in order to get the full buff in his passive, or else he's just not doing anything. He has Rainbow Orb Changing. He can't do that unless he's got a Dragon Ball Heroes or Time Traveler character attacking in the same turn. He has 2 additional supers, which give 50% chance to super if all allies are Dragon Ball Super or Dragon Ball Heroes or Time Travel category allies. So basically, if you don't run him on a team of either Dragon Ball Heroes or Time Travelers, he has like no kit. He literally has almost nothing except for he has a 70% chance to crit. And that's it. That's all he has. You would even, if you didn't run him on a full Dragon Ball Heroes or Time Traveler team, he would also have like no HP or no defense or no attack, no nothing, because his attack and defense buff is dependent on your team. So I don't like that they restricted him like this because he's such a cool unit. His best link partner is a unit that you can't even run him with. You can't run him with God Goku. You can run him with this God Goku, which is fine. He's a very good link partner with this God Goku. I will say that. His ideal one right now. And then, Saiyans with no limits, etc. But once we get the 7th anniversary gods, Easy A on 10th anniversary, we could see new life being brought into him. It's just really hard to say because once again, this is time traveler. He's not a time traveler right here. You have to be on Time Traveler or Dragon Ball Heroes to get his full boost. So he actually isn't going to be able to go onto their team unless there's like an absurd amount of extra support. But yeah, I like God Trunks. I really do. I just really wish they didn't heavily restrict him to only 2 categories in the Bloody game. It's really unfortunate. But he is an older unit. He does do pretty good dang damage. Defense is good enough, in my opinion. But no matter what way you look at him, he's a full additional unit and then put the rest into dodge. So. The next unit on here is going to be Gohanks. I do have a build video with him and the Gotenks unit that he is perfectly paired with. But basically, Gohanks and Gotenks here are the exact same unit. Suffice to say a couple differences. The major difference, honestly, is going to be the fact that Gotenks has Kamehameha. Otherwise, they're both pretty much trapped to Super Saiyan 3 and Heroes states, or crossover states, basically. They both have the exact same kit. I'm not even going to lie to you on that one. They literally have the exact same kit. Except I think their super attack might be a little different. Gohanks seals and Gotenks lowers attack and defense. They both get 2 free additional super attacks when there's another crossover category ally attacking in the same turn, or when the enemy's super sealed or attack down, defense down status for Gohanks. And they both auto crit when there's a Super Saiyan 3 category ally attacking in the same turn. So you can see, they can triple guaranteed super every single time on every turn that they are together. So that is something to keep in mind for these two. Gohanks, I would highly suggest just giving him full dodge at 55%, just because he's an intelligence unit. But once you get dupes from him, just give him full additional so you can get another free crit and put the rest into dodge and give him an HP orb because they do suffer from low stats. And then for Gotenks, I would highly suggest that you just go ahead and let me go past Goku here. I would just give him full-on additional in general at 55%, and then give him more additional with dupes and put the rest into dodge. Basically the exact same way that you would build Gohanks. So, with that being said, we will actually go over the new STR Universe Tree Goku right now. Alright, so we're on the Universe Tree Goku, and basically at 55%, you're just going to want to give him additional, and then a defense orb. At the end of the day, this Goku is primarily going to be used for a defensive option. He does have a very good spike of damage early on in fights and after you use his active skill. But at the end of the day, I really do feel like he's just here primarily to be a tank. He does have built-in crit in his super attack, which is 30%. And then he has a natural level 5 crit in his hidden potential, so that's like 40% chance to crit. And then on his active skill, he automatically crits for that turn. So, I mean, you don't need to give him crit, but some people don't find the use of the dodge, and I completely understand that. You just want to do damage. I completely understand that. That's why I did this right here. But no matter what way you feel about dodge or crit, you want to go full additional with this Goku. It's very right in front of your face. Give him full additional to benefit the entirety most of all worlds. Some people probably won't do this, but I would highly suggest giving him like even a level 7 defense orb on his bronze, and then just putting the rest into additional and dodge. As far as his kit goes, he's actually not too bad and can go on several different 200% option teams, including TEQ and Kamehameha and Roshi and so forth. All these teams he's going to thrive on. The worst thing about this Goku is that he wants to either have another Xeno unit on the team or 3 other crossover category allies on the team. And without doing that, you run the chances of not having guard the entire time, because if you have 5 or more key spheres, he has guard. But if you don't have 5 or more key spheres, it's not guarding. And he really wants more orbs. He's very orb hungry. If you get 7 orbs, he'll get an attack 150% for the rest of battle. I will say that the additional attack buffs he gets with the orbs is one time. Like, he just needs to collect 7 key spheres and he has all of his attack buffs all at once. But at the same time, every single turn, he needs to have 5 key spheres in order to have guard. The reason this Goku can be so good is because he has guard 40% damage reduction so long as he collects 5 key spheres. So the biggest suggestion I can have for this Goku is make sure he's with an orb changer, or you have good orb management to be using with him. He's a decent leader as well with Kamehameha and Power Beyond Super Saiyan and Dragon Ball Heroes. So, and his active skill is actually very good because it buffs him by 30% defense and all of his attacks become crit. But that also, once again, leans more into more additional. He's pretty straightforward, and I feel like he'll get even more of a lease on life when we get a Super Easy A for the Kaioken Blue Goku here, and we get an Easy A for the 7th anniversary gods come the 10th anniversary. So, very good unit, but that would be my suggestion for him right there. We're getting so close to the end of this, I can feel it. The next unit we're gonna go over is INT Towa. Towa's pretty good. She's full dodge though, 100% full dodge. I don't even need the pointer for that, but I'll point it to you. Level 20 dodge. That's pretty much all she's here for. She can go on like Lord Slug team and other heroes teams and so forth. But she's basically just a 40% supporter, potentially pushing it to 50%. She's got a 50% chance to dodge when HP is 50% or more. And then she can actually buff Extreme Class allies by an additional attack and defense 60% and recovers HP, 50% HP when their HP is 50% or less, once only. The only unfortunate thing about her is that she only has 50% dodge chance. If she had more dodge chance, she would be a lot better. 40% support is also good, but it's like bare minimum nowadays. So, and the HP recovery is very nice, though. I will say that. The HP recovery is pretty nice. And, you know, once it procs, you're supporting 100% on that rotation, which is insane, mind you. You don't really need to worry about Link Partners. Link Partners is not what she's meant to be here for, but, you know, on the off chance, probably the STR Towa is the best thing you can do. And they actually have good damage right there. When they're linked together, it's like 10 mil. Pretty crazy. But yeah, she's a full dodge unit. Moving on to the next unit, which is going to be Janemba. So, Janemba is not a full dodge unit. Probably some people would think that he is, but full dodge actually hurts this unit immensely. If you're going to be using this Janemba, I would highly suggest that you just give him, you know, full on bronze defense orb, and then put the rest into additional, and then put the rest into dodge. Dodge does hurt him because he does need to build up. He is on primarily Heroes team. You can run him on physical rows, but I wouldn't suggest it purely because he needs to be run with crossover. So the reason I went with additional is because he raises attack and defense by 30% for 3 turns, and he also lowers the enemy's attack for 3 turns. If you didn't know, when you lower an enemy's attack and defense, it only lasts for the turn of and the next turn. So basically what lowering attack and defense of the enemy for 3 turns does is that it goes on to the next time he appears. So then you can stack on top of that. It's pretty nice to be able to do that. It actually does add an extra layer of lowering attack and defense. He has built-in additionals when facing multiple enemies. He's got guard, but the big thing about him is that he only has his, like, normal boost per crossover category ally on team. So he's trapped to the crossover category, and it really does kind of hurt him, especially since he actually loses the additional supers and guards after 5 turns. Once the 5 turns have elapsed and he's lost guard, he actually gets immensely weaker, and to the point of where he does become a little bit dodge or die. At least on supers. He'll be fine on normals, but if you also lose his stacks every single turn, then you will notice his defense is much, much lesser without that guard being proc. So although I do think he is a good unit, he just doesn't link with very many units outside of... he doesn't link with very many units that are not on crossover, you know? Like, he needs to be linked with another Janemba, but there's not really another Janemba to viably use on crossover. So, unfortunately, they did restrict him pretty heavily, but the team that the full crossover team that he's on, he can be pretty solid as a defensive option, at least for 5 turns. But yeah, full additional and then put the rest into dodge. If you're putting on full dodge, you're actually hurting yourself a little bit here because he does get an additional defense of 60% with each attack received. And you really want to get this built up as soon as possible. It's only up to 180%. It's not every turn, so you only need to get this. You only need to get him hit 3 times. So it is what it is. You can go full dodge. It's just I have had a couple times where because I had too much dodge on him, all of a sudden he dodged normals and he couldn't tank the next turn because he didn't have enough defense even with the guard. He's on a very, very subtle level of defense that you want that to go off immediately. And you kind of want the build-up from his super attack a little bit more because that will help you a lot. So, I mean, he's only good for the first 5 turns anyways, so that's why I feel additional is just the better way to go anywho. But you can go full dodge if you so wish. The next unit is going to be, once again, another new unit that does has his own video if you want to go take a look at it. Alright, so we're moving on to Kid Fu, Youthful Fu. So he does have quite a few different options, but he's going to be a full additional unit pretty much through and through. I would say his home is basically on the Fusion Zamasu team. I wouldn't say you should be running him on Heroes teams, because he is extreme centered to a degree. That's something to keep in mind. He greatly stacks his attack, and he greatly raises his defense, and he's got a 50% chance to stun. But he also does get a chance to perform a critical hit plus 20% for crossover or time traveler category ally attacking in the same turn, specifically. So you really want to kind of try and run him with Demigra, and then floating crossover time travelers. That's not too bad. 20% is 20%. He does have a little bit more crit chance in here per actual super attack performed. So he can actually get up to like 60% damage reduction. Or not damage reduction, but critical hit, even if you only have him and Demigra on the same attacking turn. He is both restricted to crossover time traveler, but not kind of. It's very interesting. He does have a good high peak, but then, if you don't actually put him on a team where he's, getting his full passive, you can feel the difference. He orb changes. He can like quad, penta, super. He's got damage reduction up to 60%. He's got 80% crit chance. He literally changes the field of orbs into half AGL and half TEQ. It's really funny to watch that. Sometimes this actually does kind of throw me off, specifically when Super Fu is involved, because the STR Super Fu needs STR key spheres. So if you run into a rotation where this activates and Super Fu's on the same rotation, but Super Fu's ability activates afterwards, that becomes a problem. It shouldn't, but at the same time, it can happen, and it could be a real big issue. He does have big bad bosses and demonic power, cold judgment, and like I said, he does link perfectly with Super Fu, but these two can actually butt heads and cause issues for each other, and by each other, I mean just Super Fu. So Kid Fu can cause issues for Super Fu, but otherwise, he's just the best link partner, really, other than Meki Bora, to be rocking with Demigra. But yeah, he's a very good unit. But considering he gets built up damage reduction and critical based on his additionals, it is 100% no questions asked. You should just be giving him full additional and putting the rest into dodge. You could go ahead and give him an HP orb, defense orb, attack orb. Every type of orb will help him. But just remember, heroes units do have lower stats in general. So if you do put HP orbs on him, it might actually help your overall HP. You can also give him more additional rather than dodge if you so feel it. I don't feel like he's in danger of dying as long as he fully additionals 2 extra times plus. We will move on to the next unit, which is going to be the Dark Mask King. This one's kind of a controversial one as far as like he's good enough kind of thing. I think he's a very excellent unit still. though he has fallen off just quite a bit. Go ahead and go full additional, and then either choose crit or dodge. He does need to get hit, though. That is one thing to remember about this guy. Definitely give him a defense orb. As far as his 200% teams, it's going to be either Super Saiyan Vegeta or Heroes. That's going to be basically the only teams to be running him on a 200%. He does raise defense on Super, and he greatly lowers attack and defense of the enemy, which is actually very useful. This is the part of his passive that actually does matter a lot, and it's getting hit and getting that extra 150% defense. This matters extensively to the point of where if he doesn't get hit and you wait too many turns, he could get you caught. The good thing is that he does have guard when there's a Dragon Ball Heroes ally attacking in the same turn, which is nice, and he does recover HP based on the damage he's dealt. And that's the kind of the reason for the critical, is because 10% of the damage dealt as HP is pretty crazy. So what, 10% of 1 million damage. If he does 1 million damage, you're gonna recover what, 10k or 100k, somewhere around there. The point is that the more damage you do, the more HP you recover. So there is an argument to be running critical, but at the end of the day, he is kind of just a tank and utility-based unit, and the HP is more of an afterthought, but it is something to be aware of and to take advantage of if you can. His best link partner, unfortunately, is a pretty, I will say, mid unit, and you probably will, more often than not, never actually use this rotation. Mostly because that other Mass Saiyan Vegeta will probably get killed. So, although I do think that he is in a weird spot, and he kind of struggles finding a good team to be on now, or a spot on the team, like bro thinks he's on the team kind of thing. I still think he's a very good unit, and I still think you can utilize him in certain areas of content. We're moving on to Mechibura, which honestly is probably my favorite unit of this hero celebration after his EZA. So before you get into dupes, I would probably just say give him crit, because he's a stacker. He stacks attack, he has very high damage ceiling, and he's already got built-in additionals and decent damage reduction. The only thing he's not doing is having damage. So otherwise, you can give him additional instead. Additional would be actually pretty decent as well for a 55%, but then you're just not doing damage. I would suggest going more into additional for defensive purposes, of course, and then giving him HP orb for more HP, of course. But at the end of the day, I do really feel like this guy really definitely wants some crit with how high his damage can get with a guaranteed additional super. I've seen this guy do 30 million plus and not even stacking that hard. It just, you put him on the correct team with the right people, and he does some pretty good work, I will say. But yeah, it's either full additional or maybe even full crit. Because if you go into his kit here, like first of all, his 200% options, he's on Lord Slug or Fusion Zamasu. Both of those are very excellent teams to be throwing him onto. Heroes isn't even his best team, but you can also throw him on the Fat Boo's team, which is a very excellent team as well. He greatly stacks his attack, man. I mean, that you can't discount that. He greatly stacks. And then he greatly raises defense and lowers the enemy's attack and defense. He orb changes into Rainbow Key Spheres. He gets plus 25% attack and defense per Key Sphere. And he gets an additional attack and defense. I mean, it's orbs. He gets different buffs based on the orbs, but basically you want to go for AGL Key Spheres along with as many as possible. He recovers. I cannot believe people are just overlooking this. He recovers 10% HP and reduces damage received by 10% per Rainbow Key Sphere obtained. So if you grab 3 Rainbow Key Spheres, that's 30% damage reduction, and he recovers 30% of your health. Yeah, 30% of your health. That's a quarter of your health bar. You grab 4 Rainbow Key Spheres, that's 40% damage reduction, and 40% health. That's dang near half your health, man. This has been so clutch already. Like, this right here alone has been absurdly clutch for me in so many fights already. I can't express how much I love this part of his passive. And then he gets another additional super attack with 2 or more Rainbow Key Spheres, which should be dirt easy because he Rainbow Orb changes. This guy's great. fantastic. He's got big bad bosses, godly power, and he's got the perfect slot 1 unit. He's got the perfect slot 1 unit with this Demigra and perfect link partner. This is a crazy rotation right here. This is a crazy rotation that is an amazing slot 1 unit, rainbow orb changing, healing, damage dealing. There is easily one of my favorite rotations in the game now. And that's not exaggerating. It is easily one of my favorite, if not almost my favorite right now. So, full additional for more defense and build up, and then put some into crit. You got to have some crit on this guy. You're going to regret it if you don't put crit into him because of how much damage he can do. For real. Just for real. We're going to move on to a fun one. I'll be honest, I didn't have fun making his build, because I feel that Super Saiyan 3 Rose, he was kind of difficult last year too when he came out, and I really struggled with his build in general because he wants to be a damage dealer. He wants to be a tank. He doesn't want to support. He doesn't want to support at all. I struggled to find a purpose for this guy. I struggled to find a purpose for him. And it's not that he's not a good unit. But anyways, 55%, just go ahead and give him more additional. He's a physical unit, so he's already going to have level 5. Just give him 12 total of level 12 additional. That's what I would suggest for a 55% build. Going on to dupes, you have choices. You either go with a full dodge and crit build to try and do as much damage as you can potentially do, or you go for a full additional and put the rest into dodge. So here's the thing. Here's the thing about Rose. His defense is literally bare minimum good enough with guard. With guard, bare minimum is good enough. But he has to additional 2 to 3 times. If he doesn't at the very least double super in a turn after he's transformed into his full power Rose Super Saiyan 3 state, he's just gonna die. And he's a dodge or die at that point. He's not supporting. He doesn't have big bad bosses, which is counterintuitive to his best link partners and teams that he wants to be run on, who rock big bad bosses and need big bad bosses. So when I'm constantly going over this guy and I'm thinking of how to build him and use him, I don't view him as a support unit. His damage only gets up to about the 10 million state, and you can go a little bit higher if you got lucky with his additionals in his base state, because he does stack attack in his base, but you have to get additionals off. As far as his team goes, you're going to only use him on Fusion Zamasu or on Physical Rose's team. That's it. You're going to be suffering if you put him on a super base team, because it's just not going to meld well, you know? Although I will say he has some super units where he does mix well, oddly enough, because of godly power. But that's just because of one link. So he has high chance of guarding all attacks, unless there's 3 or more crossover category allies on the team. This guy doesn't need to be run on a full crossover team. What he does need is he does need to be floated if that's the case, though, because he can't go in slot 1. He's not defensively viable enough. In slot 2, as long as you didn't kill the enemy from the slot 1 unit, then you can try and build up as much as possible. He doesn't have a huge amount of damage in his base. But he can launch an additional super attack with a 70% chance if you're fighting a Goku. But if you're not fighting a Goku, then basically you only have your initial super, and then you have your hidden potential, and that's it. And the odds are is you're only going to super once during the turn, and that's just not going to be good enough. So you're basically just kind of floating him off and waiting until he transforms into this state, in which he still only raises attack and defense for the turn, but he stops stacking at that point. He starts healing, which is good. That's a support-esque kind of ability. But otherwise, he's not really doing much here. And now his defense is actually tied to your HP bar, which I feel like really killed this unit for me in a lot of ways, because unless I'm at full HP, his defense is too low. Yeah, his defense is too low if you're not at full HP. The guard helps. The guard is nice. But even if you're guarding and your maximum defense is only like 1.2 to 3 million, it's just not good enough, man. It's just not. And that's after triple supering. This is a unit that double supers on average. You're only ranging about 900k to a million defense at full rainbow with an ideal 200% team. So, I mean, guard or not, it's just not enough. He needs to triple super to be very, very good, in my personal opinion. And with his options for teammates, I mean, he just doesn't have them. I mean, this is his new best teammate, and the only reason it is because of the Godly Power link. That's literally it. You can throw him onto Fusion Zamasu's team and rock him with Fizzrose, but the thing is, remember, he doesn't have big bad bosses, so you're actually hurting every extreme physical Rose, every Rose in general, every Zamasu, you're hurting them because this guy doesn't have big bad bosses. So what happens is you have to throw him into slot 1, or you have to throw him into slot 3. And honestly, you just want to float him. So, I have a hard time rocking this guy. I really do. I really do. I like Super Saiyan 3 is my favorite form. But it's really hard to rock him. It really is. So you either rock him on a full Heroes team with Super Saiyan World Tree Goku, and literally just float him off for defensiveness. You run him on his own team on a weaker team, or you run him on Fusion Zamasu or Physical Rose's team and you float him off there. I think no matter what, he is subjugated to being floated, especially on the Zamasu or Fizz Rose team. As far as his link partners go, I mean, he'll get the most links with Super Saiyan 4 Broly just because of, like, Brutal Beatdown and so forth. But otherwise, his best link partner is still, once again, other Goku Blacks / Roses, or even Goku. Just because of Godly Power. And that's it. Otherwise, he just has, like, standard Super Saiyan prepared for battle, and that's it. Like, there's not much to this guy as much as I want there to be. I still think he's a good unit. I still think he's leagues above a lot of the Heroes units in general. I just have so many issues with him because his kit is so conflicting of the placements that he wants to be on. But, he has the HP recovery, he does guard, he does have a usage, and if you're fighting a Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Goku, he actually can look a lot better because of the way his kit is designed to be fighting, well, Goku. Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Goku specifically. But yeah, my suggestion to him is definitely going to be, this is my primary one right here. This is my primary suggestion for the majority of audiences. Just give him full additional, put the rest into dodge. Because he's additional or die, and then he's also dodge or die. You have better odds getting additionals. But then, if you're a person that's not going to be taking him into absurdly hard content, you're just going to be fighting Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Gokus on his ideal teams, then full additional, put the rest into crit so he can do some damage. Because that's the thing. He's not doing any damage without any crit. Literally. He's like doing almost no damage without any crit. But mixing the crit with the additionals, he'll actually be doing something. I still do suggest strongly a Bronze Orb to be the defensive orb option, and to move forward with that. So, I think that's going to be it for Rose. We're going to move on to the next unit here, which is going to be Vegex. Vegex also has his own video if you want to go check that out. I'm just going to kind of glaze over him real quick. At 55%, you're just going to give him additional because he is a defensive stacker. So just give him, I'm sorry, this is incorrect. I didn't even, oh boy. Sorry about that. I had to go fix that. That was going to bug the crap out of me. Give him level 7 additional. Yeah, give him level 7 additional, and then once you get more dupes for him, then you're going to want to make sure that he goes up to maximum additional and put the rest into dodge. And there's no real reason to go any other direction other than that. He is a Super Saiyan primary team, I would feel. I don't see much of a reason to be rocking him on Heroes too much. Unfortunately, when you do run him on a Super Saiyan team, he is only going to be 170% on Super Saiyan Vegeta's lead, the TEQ Super Saiyan Transforming Vegeta. But that would be my suggestion, just because you have access to the Super Saiyan physical trio that will make up for that lack of 200% leader with their support buff. Like I said, he does greatly raise attack, so greatly raises defense. So he's a defensive stacker that can be a solid tank so long as you focus up on it. He does have built-in critical, and he has a little bit of additional in there. But the critical hits and launching an additional super, you do get a free super and free crits if the enemy's in attack down, defense down status. And that's the primary reason I would just suggest giving him full additional, because at the end of the day, he's supposed to be a tank. He's not going to have crazy damage, but in the areas of content where you can go ahead and attack down, defense, target, seal, and stun, he will get free critical, which is pretty bloody nice. So that is something to keep in mind. As far as his best team and leaders, like I said, Super Saiyans, and then link him up with other heroes units, or link him up with fusions specifically. So. Alright, let's move on to the next unit. We're getting very close to the end here, guys. So, Vegeta. Vegeta already got a build video, although it was an early build. His defense is okay. He can get up into the 7 to 1 million range. 700k to 1 million range, which is pretty good. If you only have a 55% copy, just go on full additional. He has built-in dodge and built-in crit. So additionals are just going to be building up your defense more. So once you get enough dupes, go ahead and go for more additional air dodge. I would still strongly suggest additional, as he is a very good damage dealing unit, burst damage dealing unit. A lot of people for the last year, and still do, burst through fights with this Vegeta, just because of his active skill and his combination with the physical Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. He can do some very serious damage. I do suggest kind of an HP orb, though. He does have really low HP, just like every other Heroes unit. Or you can switch this to attack or defense. I think Vegeta is one of those units where he can benefit from an HP attack or defense bronze orb, up to player's discretion, of course. As far as 200% teams, either just rock him on a Heroes team, or you do have the option of rocking him actually on Super Saiyan 3 Goku's team because of accelerated battle and other Potara options. The only thing that would suck about that is that you're missing out on Super Saiyan 4 options, which is definitely a good portion of his links, so that is something to keep in mind. He is a Giant Ape Fuse Fire Heroes 170 leader. He does only raise attack on Super, but his defense is good enough with the damage reduction. So long as you obviously have his intro up. His intro does only last for 6 turns, so he is on a time limit. Once this goes away, you lose 30% damage reduction and 30% crit, which can hurt you quite a bit. He's got 70% chance to additional as long as you have a Giant Ape Power crossover ally attacking in the same turn. So that would be his biggest restriction, is that in order for him to be good, he needs to have a crossover or Giant Ape category character on the same attacking turn. And when you use his active, all of his attacks become crits. His best link partner is going to be the other Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. This is probably one of the most deadly and dangerous rotations you can do in the game because of how much damage you can do. You can do an absurd amount of damage with this combination right here. So, and with all that being said, we're already pretty much done with Vegeta here, so let's move on to the other Vegeta. So this is Limit Breaker, Vegeta's best partner. Unfortunately, he has not aged well. Defensively, I would just highly suggest level 7 dodge. Highly suggest just level 7 dodge, and then once you get dupes, either go leaning into more dodge or give him full-on additional, because if you go on to the full additional, he's going to be basically on the same teams as the Limit Breaker Vegeta. Except for the fact that he also has the Kamehameha option. He greatly raises defense on Super. He does have a little bit of damage reduction. I just don't feel like it's enough because it's 5% per crossover a Giant Ape. So basically a full team will give him 25% damage reduction, and that's it. 25% doesn't go very far, especially when your defense on a double super is still only about 700, 800k at the most. He really needs the extra support in order to be able to be defensively viable enough. The good thing is like this right here, this high chance of nullifying super attack and countering, is what saves this Vegeta from being just one-tapped all the time. Because normals, he can survive for the most part. But supers, he's just dead. So you have a coin flip chance of surviving every super that comes at him, basically, which is better than the dodge, in all honesty. It really is. It's better than the dodge, in my opinion. But yeah, once again, basically the same. Any team that you're going to be rocking with Super Saiyan 4 Limit Breaker Vegito is the same team you're going to want to rock with this guy. 100%, 100-fold. So, I have a feeling a lot of people just go full dodge with him at this point, but I still feel like full additional is probably better for him, just defensively wise, so that you can more guaranteed tank normals and hopefully pray to RNGesus that he just counters any super that comes at him. Alright, we're getting close to the end of the line here. Last few units, literal last few. We got Xeno Goku up here, who is basically going to be the exact same as the Super Saiyan Xeno Vegeta. They are built the exact same, I will tell you that. So these also have their own dedicated build video if you want to go take a look at that. Basically full additional unit no matter what for Goku. He is going to be additional on 55%, and when you get dupes, just go full additional. Put the rest into crit if you wish for him to do damage eventually once he stacks up enough, or just put the rest into dodge, for he is basically just a support unit. He has Kamehameha, so he can fit on some nice Roshi or Gohan-based teams. He can fit on a lot of teams, in all honesty. He is a Goku family supportive unit. He greatly stacks attack and defense, and he has a 70% chance to stun. Unfortunately, his EZA basically just gave him a little bit higher stats, and the first turn he has damage reduction. But after that first turn, he's literally just kind of a build up and hope you can survive, and then dodge or die supers. So I just really wish that the damage reduction was staying with him. Otherwise, he's pretty much just a floating 50% Goku family support. Still a very good unit, still stacker. Stackers are nice. As any stacker that greatly stacks attack and defense, it's highly advised that you just go for full additional. And as far as it goes for Vegeta, as I said before, it's kind of the same thing. Instead, though, because he's intelligence, you do miss out on 12 on a 55. Just give him the additional, though, because he needs to be stacking. He actually has a little bit of a better options because he's Vegeta. He can go on several other teams because he's a Vegeta family supporter. He greatly raises attack and defense, stacking, and he greatly lowers attack. I do feel like the greatly lowering attack is actually more valuable than anything else. Like, greatly lowering attack is better than greatly lowering defense, in my opinion. It just helps out. He does guard for the first turn, but it's literally just the first turn. And then he has Vegeta family support for 50%. Just like Goku, he's a 50% support to the Vegeta family instead of Goku family. And he does all the same things. He has built-in additionals, but that's just his whole thing, is you just want to stack, 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 stack. So give him full additional. You can either put the rest into rest into crit, or you can put the rest into dodge. I feel like a lot of people are just going to put the rest into dodge for Vegeta, but I will say that both this Goku and this Vegeta, in a burst mode, that crit might come in handy in a burst mode per se. So keep that in mind when you're building them, if you want to build them for that, because I don't think either this Goku or this Vegeta is going into actual difficult content like Red Zone, Blue Zone. At least not modern ones. They're just not defensively viable enough even after the stacking. They need to stack a lot in order to be defensively good enough. So, but they're still very useful units in my personal opinion. So. And to end the video off on every single Dragon Ball Heroes unit, we got Pan here, which is just a straight up full dodge or die unit. 55%, just give her level 12 dodge. And then, of course, once you get dupes for her, just go ahead and put the rest into additional. She actually can get to a very respectable, like, 2 million defense. She's a very good supportive unit in general for heroes. That's pretty much her only placement is on heroes. She has greatly raised attack and defense, and she does have a utility of 50% chance to stun. She does support crossover category allies, key plus 3, and attack and defense plus 40%. And then heroes get a total of 60% support. So she is a very good support unit for heroes in general. She has 70% chance to crit and 70% chance to dodge. And she gets 70% defense within the same turn of each attack evaded. This is where the core of her defense is, though. I'm just going to let you all know that. This is the core of her defense. It's not on her super. It's on her dodges. If she doesn't dodge, she doesn't have any defense. If she doesn't dodge before she builds up defense, you're potentially dead. So, unfortunately. But otherwise, she doesn't have too much else going for her other than, yeah, that's it. She does give all allies a chance of performing a critical hit plus 15% also. So that is something to keep in mind. It does help out quite a bit on a lot of teams. But overall, she is pretty much just a dodge or die support. And that's just the way it is. So with that all being said, every single bloody... Literally every other freaking... every hero... Did I get them all? Did I get all the heroes units? Did I get them all? This has been a 2-hour video. I'd be astonished if anybody actually watched the whole freaking thing. We definitely got all of Goku, Vegeta, Rose, Robelu, all the Towas, the Demigras, the Mass Saiyans, all these crazy what-if freaking stuff. I don't think I missed a single one. Yeah, no. I did not miss a single heroes unit. There's a lot of heroes units. There's like 59 units in here. I'm sorry that I couldn't get more detailed. I apologize if you have questions. Please comment below if you have questions about any of the builds still. I will try to give my 10 cents in the build video because I don't think we'll ever be touching up on any of these units again. They did say that these characters that can Easy A will be getting Easy A's in the future if they are available. So we can't assume that Hearts and Robelu and the Brainwashed Supreme Kai, the Super Saiyan 4 Bardock and Gohan, these Limit Breaker Goku and Vegetas, like there's tons of potential Easy A's that we could get in the future. But I am still not going to hold my breath as the Heroes IP has ended. And therefore, so has this video. So, let me know what character brought you to looking for this video and how to build them. And how did you build them? What's your favorite Heroes team? Are you sad that Heroes units are gone? Thank you for watching, everyone. Have a good day and a good night.